Episode 9. Xin Haoyue will never return to you. You'll be left to die by yourself. Shishi's words echoed in his ears over and over again. Die alone? Even if she never woke up, he'll still always stay by her side, watching over her. Chen Xinan opened his eyes and saw that pale, nearly bloodless face under the dim lights, and reached out to stroke her cheek. Softly, he called out, "Honey, wake up. Please, wake up." If this went on, then he was afraid he wouldn't be able to hold on and surrendered first. His days in the hospital were extremely lonely and unbearable. Chen Xinan hadn't returned to the home that belonged only to him and Xin Haoyue for a very long time. On his day, when Wang Yinlin came over early in the morning, she brought him a letter. Chen Xinan looked at the letter and asked before taking it, "What's this, Mom?" "I found this letter on the dresser in your bedroom when I went over to your room to pack up some things to bring over for Haoyue." Chen Xinan seemed to have realized something and reached out to take it, immediately unwrapping it frantically. Indeed, the writing inside belonged to her. It wrote, "Chen Xinan, if you're reading this letter, then I'm sure you must be very sad at this moment. I've been worrying a lot ever since I was pregnant with our baby, because I had a feeling that I would have to leave you when this baby was born. Chen Xinan, I can't let you go. I don't think I would have found happiness if I hadn't met you. Thanks to you, I experienced all this love and warmth. If I'm really gone, I hope you won't forget me. Raise our child. If you find someone else you like, please ask her to treat our child well too. Chen Xinan, if you really do want to forget me, then just forget about me. If forgetting me makes things easier for you, then just forget me. Living alone in your memories is much too bitter. I feel regretful that I'll never have the chance to be by the child's side as they grew up. I think I'll miss them a lot, and I'll probably dream of his upbringing inside my mind. Chen Xinan, I think the child will be able to keep you company at the very least in the future. So let the child replace me. Let the child go through these days with you without me. Also, when you left the name of the child to me, I thought about it for a long time. If it's a boy, then his name will be Chen Chenan. If it's a girl, then she will be Chen Chening. What do you think? I just want our child to grow up healthy and peacefully. Chen Xinan, please take good care of our child. I love you." Chen Chenan read the letter over and over, countless times. Tears flowed down his eyes and he raised his head, closing his eyes. He loves her too. He'll wait for her return. Together with their son, they'll wait for her to return. Seeing this, Wang Yinlin, who was standing at the side, patted him on the shoulder. "Haoyue has actually been by our side the whole time. Even if she never woke up, you still have to take care of yourself or she'll be sad." "I know, Mom." Then, he continued, "the child's name will be Chen Chenan, Mom. I'll call Dad and Grandpa to talk to them about this." "All right." So, 3 weeks after the birth of the Chen family's youngest member, the child finally received his name, Chen Chenan, nickname Anan. Anan had been clinging to Chen Xinan since he was very young. No matter whether he was drinking his milk or sleeping, he would cry as long as Chen Xinan wasn't the one helping him with his needs. But if Chen Xinan were to walk over while he was crying and reach out to hold him, he wouldn't even need to say anything. Just one look, and the baby will stop immediately. He would even wave his small little hands, smiling happily. The elders said that this child was very smart. He was able to recognize faces already at such a young age. Chen Xinan thought so as well. How could their child not be smart? On the day the child reached 1 month old, Shi died in prison. The cause of death was suicide. When Chen Xinan's friend told him the news, Chen Xinan was silent. How could she choose to end her life at this time? I seriously don't get it. But Chen Xinan didn't tell him that she must have wanted to leave this false world since her wish had come true anyway. Xin Haoyue won't ever wake up again. But Shi was dead. And the world continued running as usual. Their days still had to go on. Chen Xinan seemed to have gotten used to his life of watching over Xin Haoyue while raising their child. He accepted the fact that he had no idea when he was going to wake up and began slowly reverting back to his old self. During the day, he donned a suit and went to work. At night, he would accompany her and the child. Chen Chenan really was a smart child. He learned much faster than any other kid. But of course, he was also very naughty. Ever since learning to turn over, it would spend the whole night awake, tossing and turning in his own crib, having the time of his life. During the 3 months that Xin Haoyue was asleep, she never went a day without visitors. Mao Xiuan watched with his own eyes how Chen Xinan thinned with each day. He hoped every single time that he came to the hospital that the lifeless Xin Haoyue could sit up to scold him. At the very least, it was better than nothing, but there was much he wanted to say to Chen Xinan. But when he saw him, he didn't know where to start. Should he persuade him to stop waiting for her? That's too cruel. Should he tell him to leave his days well? Too weak. Mao Xiuan believed that the only thing he could contribute was to support him silently at the side. Zhuang Jie visited the hospital often as well. Only, he had also been getting a little anxious lately. One time after he finished playing with Chen Chenan, he said to Chen Xinan with a smile, "Your son is a delight, makes me want a baby of my own. Only, I wonder where the mother of the child is. We're truly brothers in pain, aren't we, Chen Xinan?" Zhang Qin and Gu Tong, who was just about to enter the room, looked at each other for a moment, but neither of them said anything. Their own best friend had mysteriously fallen into a coma. From being unable to accept this fact, they had now given up hope. By now, hope had become a faraway thing. Whether or not Xin Haoyue would be able to wake up, they no longer knew. They figured that if she didn't wake up, then they would run out of strength and courage to hold on. Only Chen Xinan always believed that she would definitely wake up. On this weekend, he filled up a basin of warm water to help her wipe her face and hands. The sun was glowing brightly. As Chen Xinan wiped her fingers skillfully, he said, "The weather is wonderful today. Mom brought Anan back home to see Grandpa. It feels really quiet without him around. It would be nice if you could talk to me at a time like this. Honey, I know you'll wake up, so I'll keep waiting. I'll wait for the day you wake up again." Chen Xinan continued to tell her many things. By the time he was done and went up to pour out the water, he did not realize that as the winds blew the curtains over the bed, the fingers of the person who had been lying quietly on the bed moved ever so slightly. What kind of thoughts ran through Xin Haoyue's mind when she went to the disaster area? Perhaps she herself had no idea. Only, in that instant when all her colleagues had taken a step back, she unexpectedly said, "I'll go." As soon as she said that, she could feel the changes in everyone's gaze. Xin Haoyue did not try to understand the deeper meanings of their looks. All she knew was that the team leader asked, "Do you know what this trip means?" She nodded and smiled. "I know. There was a huge risk and even a threat to her life, but she wanted to go." It felt like she couldn't find a reason not to. When she was packing her bags, she suddenly saw the book by her pillow, and she froze. Looking at that book for a long time, she did not move. Then she resolutely put that book into her luggage. With it, she felt like she could gain a boost of courage. Before she left, she wanted to leave Chen Junxing a message. But she figured it would be superfluous to make him worry in vain if she were to tell him. Chen Junxing was better off living an unrestrained life. But unexpectedly, the situation in the disaster area was worse than she expected. After recording the situation almost in a hurry, she rushed to the people's aid. The aftershocks caught her by surprise. By the time she wanted to run, there was no way out. Stone pillars came crashing down, landing heavily on her weak back. She could feel the sticky blood staining her clothes. The bag she carried with her had long fallen apart, and, though she could see the book splayed out on the ground, she could no longer see the words. It took her a lot of effort to reach out, and a long time to bring the book in front of her. In the darkness, she heard her feeble breaths. She wanted to call for help, but she was already out of breath. Her head was growing heavier and heavier, and she saw the book turn red. It was her blood. Everything felt like it had gone back to the beginning again. Back to the moment she fell down that stairwell. Only things were a lot different now. All the sweet and bitter moments played back in her mind just like a film. She was only in her 20s, but she felt like she had already walked through a very, very long life. Reality truly was tiring. When Xin Haoyue shut her eyes weakly, she figured that release may be a good thing. Perhaps she would be able to see that person she missed so much before she passed on. Chen Xinan. "Honey, wake up. Honey, wake up." His voice, Chen Xinan's voice. "Wake up, Haoyue? Why are there so many voices ringing in her ears? Wake up." Did she wake up? It was still dark all around her. Would she be able to see the light if she opened her eyes? "Wake up, honey, Chen Xinan." Xin Haoyue's lips moved. Her voice was very quiet, but it excited the man who was waiting by her side. She's awake. I'll go call the doctor," Xin Chanchang quickly said. "Hurry." Chen Xinan quickly leaned down to stroke Xin Haoyue's cheek. "You've finally woken up. Finally." Chen Xinan. Xin Haoyue slowly opened her eyes and saw that all too familiar face. Only, his cheeks were much thinner. "Are you Chen Xinan? Honey?" Chen Xinan buried his head between her shoulder, his own trembling uncontrollably. Xin Haoyue could feel the hot feeling through the fabric on her shoulder. Her heart moved and she subconsciously said, "I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Everything is fine now that you're awake." Xin Haoyue wanted to reach out to hold him, only to find that her hands were weak and frail. Chen Xinan sensed her intentions and quickly told her not to move. After the doctor came over and finished his examination, he said, "Everything is normal. She's woken up after being asleep for a long time, so her body needs some time to adjust. She'll be fine as long as proper care is taken." "Thank you, doctor." Xin Haoyue thanked her and realized that this doctor seemed to be not much older than herself. She was young and very pretty. The doctor looked at her and said, "No need to thank me. I'm the one who should thank you instead." Then, she gave a meaningful glance to Xin Chanchang, who was standing at the side, and said, "Mr. Xin, may I ask if my reputation is saved now?" Xin Chanchang raised his eyes and also shot her a meaningful glance, but he did not speak. But in the next second, the doctor looked away. "Mrs. Chen, please have a good rest and pay attention not to eat anything too heavy these 2 days." "All right." Xin Haoyue smiled faintly. Chen Xinan was by her side, tidying up her pillow, and thanked the doctor as well. Xin Haoyue clearly noticed that the doctor had a very strange expression. After the doctor left, Xin Chanchang looked at his phone and said, "I'll go get Mom and Dad." "Okay?" Then Xin Haoyue began to think again, and she asked Chen Xinan, "Does my brother know that doctor from earlier?" But Chen Xinan wasn't interested. You just woke up, so don't bother your mind overthinking about these things. Just rest. Xin Haoyue pursed her lips. She had already rested for so long that she didn't feel tired at all. How long have I been asleep? 101 days, he answered without a second thought. Where's the baby? Mom took him back home. They're on their way. Oh, I want to see him. Don't worry, you'll get to see him in the near future. That little boy is a really troublesome one, just like you. Hey, how am I troublesome? Xin Haoyue did not agree. You make me worry over you before we're married, and you make me worry over you after we're married. Tell me, when have I ever been given a break? Xinan retorted casually. Xin Haoyue was speechless for a moment. Indeed, he was rarely at ease after meeting her. So, do you regret it? She asked. Not at all, Xinan said. Then he held her face and kissed her. I'm afraid of losing you. I've always been afraid. Xinan looked at him and her eyes reddened slightly. Xinan. So, after brushing shoulders with death, are you still going to leave? Xin Haoyue shook her head with her eyes blurred with her tears. No, I won't leave again. I'll never leave for the rest of my life. Yeah, I love you. Ahem. Just as Xinan was about to kiss her, they were interrupted by a deliberate cough at the door. He looked helplessly at Xin Haoyue, but Xin Haoyue was holding back her laughter. Only, with the tears in her eyes, it was hard to tell. Grandpa, you're all here? Xinan stood up and looked to the door. I came to see my granddaughter-in-law, Grandpa Chen said as he walked straight inside. When he saw the person on the bed, he first sat down before his eyes reddened from hearing the words, Grandpa. He couldn't hold it in and said, Good, it's good that you're awake. Wang Yinlin was originally holding Chen Chenan, but as soon as the little baby saw Chen Xinan, he broke away from her embrace and stretched out his tiny little arms towards Chen Xinan desperately. Naturally, Chen Xinan picked him up. The little one clapped his small hands happily, his black pearl-like eyes glistening as they looked around nimbly. Wang Yinlin looked towards Xin Haoyue. Seeing that she had truly woken up, she was overcome by emotion and took her hand, saying, You really worried us sick sleeping for so many days. Chen Xinan had been watching over you day and night, hoping that you'd wake up. But now, what a joy, my child. How could you sleep for so long? Xin Haoyue held deep guilt over this matter. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for making you all worry so much. Wang Yinlin said to her, Everything is fine now that you're awake. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, Mom. Chen Xinan, I want to hold him. Anan, this is your mama. Worried that Xin Haoyue's energy hadn't returned yet, Chen Xinan came closer to her while holding the baby. Xin Haoyue looked at his big round eyes and the little bubbles on his mouth and couldn't help but feel warm. Anan, Wang Yinlin said, The child is healthy and very cute, Haoyue. You've worked hard. No, Mom, it's you all who have been working hard. She could imagine how difficult it was for them to keep up their hopes while she was in a coma. It wasn't hard at all, as long as the family's together, Grandpa Chen said. Yes, Grandpa. Xin Haoyue looked at the child without turning away, gently picking up his hands with her fingers. He immediately gripped onto her fingertips and watched her firmly. Anan, I'm your mama. Chen Chenan was compliant and did not move. Anan? Xin Haoyue reached out to touch his smooth little face, and she couldn't help but bend down to give him a kiss. My son? Chen Xinan on the other side said. After some time, you'll know what your son's character is really like. Xin Haoyue said to him. What, he's not your son? Chen Xinan was speechless. Well, he was his son too. The two Xin family elders were also overjoyed to see her awake. Bai Ning even hugged her and cried for a very long time. Xin Haoyue was unable to restrain herself, and the two cried in each other's embrace for a very long time. In the end, Chen Xinan and Xin Chancheng reluctantly had to tell Bai Ning to go home first to prepare a lovely dinner. After news of Xin Haoyue waking up went out, many of her friends rushed over to see her. Zhongqin skipped work just to rush to the hospital. Crying and smiling at the same time, she said, If you don't wake up, I would have shaved my head and become a nun. Xin Haoyue laughed. Miss Zhong, that's not something you should joke about. Who asked you to sleep for so long? Me and Gu Tong were both getting desperate. Fortunately, good people are favored by heaven. I told Gu Tong that if you dared abandon such a good family as yours, then you really have no class. Yeah, I got it. That's why I fought my way out and woke up. When she heard this, Gu Tong really cried. Don't scare us like that anymore. That really did a number on us. I won't do it again. Xin Haoyue rested a few days at the hospital. After the checks came out clear, and she had no other issues, she was discharged. A vast entourage came to pick her up from the hospital. Even Chen Chenan, who was only a few months old, realized that something good had happened. When Bai Ning held him, he waved his hands more joyfully than usual, looking all around the place, with a wide grin on his face. The director of the hospital saw off the group personally. Xin Haoyue's attending doctor, Su He, was invited to join as well. But actually, this patient, Xin Haoyue, was the most frustrating patient Su He had ever had. They couldn't figure out the cause of her illness, and when all hope was lost, she mysteriously woke up again. The uninformed members of the hospital even praised her for her good medical abilities. She had her arms crossed in front of her chest at that time. She wished she could roll their eyes at them and say, medical ability my ass. She barely had to do anything medical related, okay? What's more, she couldn't stop thinking about the time when Xin Chancheng was in her office, asking in contempt, "It's been so many days, Dr. Su. Are you sure you're a real doctor?" How could she refute him at that time? "Dr. Su," the dean called out to her while she was distracted. Suhei immediately came back to her senses and said to Xin Haoyue, "Congratulations on being discharged. Remember to get enough rest." "Thank you." Suhei looked at the woman standing in front of her with her clear eyes and warm smile, and she couldn't help but recall all the comments the nurses made about her in private. It was said that she was a famous host of this city's TV station. Suhei had just returned to the country, so she was busy with work. Naturally, she hadn't been paying attention to the news. It was also said that she was a very lucky woman. She got married to one of the top talents in Shenzhen City with a fortune of billions. They had a happy family and successfully created an heir. It's just that after the birth of the child, they were met with this unexpected fortune. But the gossips concluded unanimously that even if she was in a coma, she had still received 3 lifetimes worth of blessings with what she already had. Suhei witnessed how Chen Xinan and Xin Chancheng treated Xin Haoyue. She agreed with those gossips as well. Xin Haoyue really was blessed. On the night when Xin Haoyue was discharged from the hospital, Chen Xinan had plans to hold a celebration party in the old home and invited some of his good friends to participate. Xin Haoyue invited Suhei as well. "Dr. Su, would you happen to be free tonight? We would like to invite you to the celebration we're hosting tonight." Well, Suhei hesitated. That was because she did not in fact had extra work tonight. Xin Haoyue was well aware of the situation and immediately said, "That's decided then. When you're off work, I'll get someone to come pick you up, Dr. Su." Then, she happened to look at Xin Chancheng, whether purposefully or not. Suhei had also followed her gaze over to Xin Chancheng, but Xin Chancheng had his body turned to the side and only his profile could be seen. Suhei quietly spat in her heart. Huff. Then, she smiled to Xin Haoyue. "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Chen. I'll definitely go if I have time." "Sure, we'll be waiting for your grand visit this evening, Dr. Su." Suhei tugged the corners of her mouth up into a smile. Even though she could sense that Xin Haoyue was very extroverted, and she didn't mean anything bad by inviting her, she just had a hunch that things may not be as it seems. Xin Haoyue had dug out a huge pit, and she was just waiting for her to jump in, but she couldn't bother with such thoughts after she saw away the Chen and Xin families. She had an important surgery to deal with that would take quite a few hours. She didn't have the energy to think about this. On the way back, Chen Xinan held her and said in dissatisfaction, "Can you not rack your mind over things like these as soon as you wake up?" "What kind of things?" Xin Haoyue didn't understand. Xin Haoyue glanced at her and said, "You invited that doctor because you're trying to matchmake her with Xin Chancheng, aren't you?" Xin Haoyue blinked and looked at him with gleaming eyes. "So you found out?" Chen Xinan was unsurprised. "I know what you're thinking about just by looking at your eyes. You're just trying to fool that doctor and your muddle-headed brother with your little tricks." Xin Haoyue couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Oh, so turns out I'm married to such an amazing person? You just found out now?" Smiling, Xin Haoyue curled up in his arms and said, "Actually, I realized after coming back this time that I still have a lot of things holding me here. I was worried that Mom and Dad would be sad if I died, and that my brother would never find a girl he liked, being left alone forever. He's not an expressive person. Even if he cares about you a lot, he'll never say it. You have to feel it yourself. I'm just worried such a stiff person like him will never find happiness in his life." Chen Xinan sighed and asked, "What about me then?" "I'm worried too." Xin Haoyue looked up at him and said, "I'm worried that you'd be foolish enough to wait for me your whole life. Yeah, I'll wait for you to wake up for the rest of my life." Xin Haoyue smiled and reached out to wrap her arms around his neck. Fortunately, everything is going well. The celebration that night could almost be described as a gathering of friends. There was Mao Xiwan, Zhuang Jie, Ji Yi, Gu Tong, Zhong Qin, and even Shi Qiao were all present. As soon as Xin Haoyue saw Shi Qiao, she realized that he still looked the same as usual. So she smiled and said, "Long time no see." It seemed like the two had never seen each other since Xin Haoyue's wedding. When he saw her, it felt like it was a lifetime ago. "I'm relieved to see you alive and well. If you didn't wake up, then I might have been the next receiver of the host's golden microphone." Xin Haoyue smiled. "We all have our strengths." Shi Qiao smiled as well. Xin Haoyue looked around at everyone. Yeah, everyone she was close with was here with her. It was a good feeling. Suhei wasn't able to arrive before the celebration began. It took a lot of convincing for Xin Haoyue to finally talk Xin Chancheng into going to the hospital to pick the doctor up. And in the end, Xin Chancheng still returned empty-handed after they waited 2 hours. When Xin Haoyue asked for the reason, Xin Chancheng just told her plainly, she had a surgery to do. Xin Haoyue eyed the ashen look on his face, but it wouldn't be good for her to ask anything more. Suhei did not come tonight, but Mobei did. When Xin Haoyue saw how less he smiled tonight, she asked Chen Xinan in secret, "Is Mobei not doing well at work, or is it love-related?" Chen Xinan reached out to bring her into his arms and said in dissatisfaction, "You're worrying a lot about other people. Hey, just concerned about them. Are you concerned about him or Sheng Wenyang?" Chen Xinan suddenly asked. Shen Wenyang? If he didn't mention him, then Xin Haoyue would have forgotten about him and Shi. Oh, that's right. How's he doing? And what about Shi? Chen Xinan avoided the question and responded simply, Shi is dead. It was suicide. In fact, what he didn't tell Xin Haoyue was that while she was unconscious, Sheng Wenyang came many times to see him like a ghost that wouldn't let go. She thinks that she was the only one who can accompany him through the rest of his life, and naturally, Chen Xinan ignored her. But Mobei was different. It was normal to be sad, frustrated, and disappointed to know that the person you loved with all your heart had such thoughts from start to end. Chen Xinan felt that this was good. At the very least, Mobei would be able to see early on that Sheng Wenyang wasn't the right one for him. The topic of this conversation gradually drifted off with Xin Haoyue's silence. After seeing everyone off, she went into Chen Chenon's room to play with him for a while before Chen Xinan told her that time was up. It's time to put the baby to bed. Xin Haoyue was at the side, watching him change the diaper of the baby skillfully and preparing the formula. She lamented, You're much better at being a dad than I am at being a mom now. Chen Xinan looked at her and smiled. There's still many days in the future and lots of time and opportunities for you to practice. Xin Haoyue smiled and nodded. You're right. Little Anon must have exhausted himself today with all the excitement. It didn't take long for him to fall asleep. After Xin Haoyue went back into the room to take a shower, she found that Chen Xinan, who had returned when she didn't realize it, was on the bed, reading a book. She had no idea how deep into the book he was. After hearing the noise, Chen Xinan looked up towards the bathroom and saw her standing at the bathroom doorway with a pink nightgown on. Xin Haoyue's skin was fair to begin with, and now her complexion had become alabaster after these 3 months. Chen Xinan's unscrupulous gaze ran over her exposed skin for a long time. Putting his book down, he said, Come here. Xin Haoyue looked at his dark eyes and naturally knew what was in his mind. Smiling, she went over and was just about to pounce on him. But expectedly, he grabbed her hand first before she could do anything and pulled her to bed. Being flipped over, Xin Haoyue's back landed on the soft sheets. Chen Xinan moved extremely fast and pressed her down underneath himself. The two of them were so close that Xin Haoyue could almost count the number of eyelashes on his eyes. She couldn't help but reach out to touch his face from his brow bone, down to his nose, and then his cheek. Did you miss me? Chen Xinan lowered his head and dropped a kiss on her ear. I did. Xin Haoyue tilted her head slightly. I missed you so much. Chen Xinan stopped his kisses and looked at her eyes, asking, What did you experience during that period? All those painful things that seemed so distant resurfaced frame after frame at his words, as if they had just happened. When I woke up, I realized you weren't next to me anymore. I had returned to my previous world. Before I met you, I fell down the stairs and hit my head. I was unconscious there, too. For my sake, my mother sold the house and took out a mortgage to pay the debts. After I found out about this, I did my best to work so I could improve me and my mother's lives. I also tried hard to find that book, but when I found out that Shi had already passed away there, I lost hope. I searched for that book for so long and never found it. That was until I met Chen Jinxing. Chen Jinxing? Chen Xinan squinted at the words. Yeah, Chen Jinxing. Who's that? Intuition told him that this was not any ordinary man, and his surname was Chen? Yeah. I'll be honest, so don't get angry with me, Xin Haoyue quickly reminded him first. Chen Xinan looked silently at her. Was he such a petty guy in her heart? Do you think I'm that easily angry? He asked. Xin Haoyue smiled, her eyes curving into crescents. Well, you're not that petty. So, who's this Chen Jinxing person? He looks just like you, and even more amazingly, he's in the same career with you too. Only, he's engaged in the industry while you're not. Is that so? Chen Xinan's reaction was light. Both he and Shi used to live in the same neighborhood, and Shi knew him. She burned all the existing copies of that book and left him one single copy. I had only realized the truth after many years, and after finishing that book, I found out you were waiting for me. So, I desperately wanted to come back to see you. When he heard that, Chen Xinan was deep in thought for a long time. He asked, How did you come back? I ended up working for a magazine at that time as a reporter, and one of the provinces was hit by an earthquake. Nobody else would go, so I volunteered. Chen Xinan seemed to have guessed something from her words. Did something happen to you? Xin Haoyue gave him a light smile. Yeah, it was the aftershocks. I was busy trying to help with the rescue efforts, and I didn't manage to escape. Even though she was lying intact in his arms at this time, just thinking about the situation back then and how helpless she must have been, how she was all alone before her death, made Chen Xinan's heart clench. This person he loved so much that he wished he could keep in the palm of his own hands and pampered was, in a place he had no knowledge of, endured so much pain. He had so many things he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to start. Chen Xinan said in a deep voice, I'll protect you in the future. Yeah, I know. Chen Xinan, my mom died of stomach cancer. She said she was glad I was safe and sound, and in the half-month before she died, she was glad that I could be there for her. But I still feel guilty. I was still useless and unable to protect her. No, it's just fate. She left in peace, and that is enough. Xin Haoyue recalled what her mother told her before her death and said to him, "My mom also felt regretful that I never found someone I could live out the rest of my lives with." I told her I did find him. Xin Haoyue looked at him and said in a gentle voice, "I've already found him, only I never had the opportunity to show him to her." That was a regret she would never be able to mend. Chen Xinan was silent for a moment. Then, he reached out to stroke her long hair and whispered, "She'll watch us being happily together from heaven, so don't be sad." "Yeah, I know. As long as you're by my side, I'll have endless confidence and strength." Xin Haoyue blinked her eyes and felt sleepiness gushing over her. She was just about to close her eyes when she heard Chen Xinan ask, "So, what's your relationship with that Chen Jinxing?" "Huh?" Xin Haoyue opened her eyes to look at him. "What do you mean?" "He looks the same as me and is in the same profession. Even his personality is almost like mine." When Xin Haoyue heard the deeper meanings of her word, she deliberately put on a smile and said, "Oh, you're wrong. His character is different from yours. He's gentler and more gentlemanly than you." "Oh, gentler and more gentlemanly?" "Yeah, Chen Jinxing is really a good person. It's just a pity." Xin Haoyue's voice softened as her gaze deepened. "A pity what? Is it a pity you couldn't stay with him?" "Well, I just think it's a pity I never got to see him obtain happiness." Xin Haoyue would always remember Chen Jinxing's kindness. Even if he wasn't there for her during her most difficult period, where she lost her family, she was afraid that she wouldn't have been able to hold on. "Chen Xinan, yeah? No matter where I go, I will not abandon you as long as you remain in my memories. No matter where you are, I'll remain as loyal to you in our relationship as you are to me," Xin Haoyue said softly. "Even though he looked exactly like you and is the same as you in many places, I know he isn't you. You are you. You are my Chen Xinan." Each and every one of her words shook his core. This was perhaps the deepest confession he had ever heard in his life. She wouldn't leave him, wouldn't abandon him. The two of them shared the same loyalty in their feelings. "Xin Haoyue, you are also mine," Chen Xinan's. Then, without waiting for her to respond, Chen Xinan captured her lips tenderly and kissed her. The two of them had not been intimate for a very long time. Even if Chen Xinan was impatient, he seemed to be trying to refute what she said just now with all his might. He kissed her and rubbed against her body, tossing Xin Haoyue up and down. Again and again, he asked in an enchanting voice, "Does it feel good? Am I gentle?" Xin Haoyue was starting to get a little impatient and called him bastard countless times in her heart. Finally, she took advantage of his lowered guard and rolled over, grabbing the upper position. She straddled his waist and dropped her body. Chen Xinan muffled a grunt and grabbed her slender waist. Immediately, he turned her back around, pressing her beneath him again. Then, without any mercy, he began moving his hips ruthlessly. Xin Haoyue reached her arms around him and tried her best to cooperate with his movements. Only, she had exhausted all her energy in just a short while. Now she was just panting in Chen Xinan's arm while Chen Xinan held the wheel. When Xin Haoyue woke up the next day, it was already the afternoon. The harsh, hot summer sun was blinding. She changed her clothes and opened the curtains, looking outside at the blue sky and white clouds and all those familiar buildings. Suddenly, she raised the corners of her mouth. The weather is good today." When Xin Haoyue went downstairs, Grandpa Chen and the rest were playing with the kid. Even though he had small hands, the baby liked to grab at things. Grandpa Chen was teasing him with a jade pendant, bringing it high and low, near and far, but he wouldn't let him catch it. The little guy wanted to grab it, but couldn't, and was so angry that he was spitting bubbles. But both Wang Yinlin and Chen An were smiling. Chen Xinan was standing at the side, saying mercilessly, "Son, you're so stupid." The little guy seemed to be very happy, as it waved his small hands at his dad who was talking to him. Chen Xinan scratched his head helplessly. "Yeah, you're really stupid, just like your mommy." Xin Haoyue coughed lightly and greeted everyone. "Grandpa, Mom, Dad." Wang Yinlin turned around to see her walking down the stairs and quickly said, "You're awake? Aunt Song made you some soup in the kitchen. Remember to drink it later." "Thanks, Mom," Xin Haoyue said while walking up to the little guy. Seeing that Chen Xinan was holding him, she reached out, wanting to take him. But Chen Xinan said, "You should get breakfast first." "Okay," Xin Haoyue said and looked reluctantly at her child. Then, she leaned over to kiss his tender cheek. What soft skin! The more she looked at it, the more she liked it. After staying at home with the elders and the child for more than half a month, Xin Haoyue had to go back to work. After not returning for nearly half a year, Xin Haoyue looked at her workplace that had changed quite a bit and couldn't help but be filled with feelings. Life after returning to work was naturally busy. Sometimes, Grandpa or Wang Yinlin would take care of the baby, but most of the time, he was looked after by Bai Ning and her husband. It didn't matter how busy was Xin Haoyue during the day, she would still try to get off earlier so she could come home to see her child. As time went by, the little one got used to this and would stick to Xin Haoyue as soon as he saw her, just like in the beginning. Just like when he was sleeping, he definitely needed Xin Haoyue to hold him and to coax him to sleep. Chen Xinan had a lot of complaints about this. "He's a boy, but he's so needy." Xin Haoyue rolled her eyes at him, but she didn't plan to talk to him. Gradually, the differences between the two on the education of the child grew more obvious. Xin Haoyue loved the child, and she would feel very sad if the child so much as fell down or bumped into something. Xinan, however, was the reasoning type. Things like these are inevitable as the child is growing up. The more you worry over him, the more spoiled he'll become. On the other hand, Xinan had good eyes. He had already figured out who cares for him more. Every time Xinan kept that straight face on, he would seek Grandpa Chen for help or get Xin Haoyue to back him up. Xinan felt very helpless about this too. On this day, when Xinan returned to the room, he was surprised to find an extra small figure lying in the middle of his large bed. Xinan hesitated for a second and asked, "Is the kid sleeping with us?" Xin Haoyue was humming a little tune to coax him to sleep. Seeing that he had finally fallen asleep peacefully, she quickly eyed Xinan, motioning him to keep quiet. Xinan raised his brows. Oh, has his own status already fallen to this level? This weekend, Xinan began wailing early in the morning. Xin Haoyue seemed to have heard the noise as soon as she woke up and immediately sat up in bed. When he heard the noise, Xinan also woke up and saw her holding the baby. So he said, he might have wet his diaper. Xin Haoyue had a look and saw that it was really so she quickly changed his diaper. After she finished changing him, Xinan handed over the milk powder. As soon as the little guy saw that there was milk to drink, he sucked on it vigorously, taking mouthful after mouthful without stopping. Xin Haoyue reached out to nudge the bridge of his nose, laughing. What are you in such a hurry for? Nobody's going to snatch your milk. The little baby blinked his eyes at her. Xinan laughed at the side. He's just like you. Hearing that, Xin Haoyue turned to look at him and cleared her throat. Xinan, you're just like your son when you lie. Your eyes don't even twitch. Xinan said, I'm just stating facts. Humph, Xin Haoyue didn't think she had that habit. The little one must have inherited his eager nature. Such as his eagerness to do certain things in certain places at certain times. He was so annoying and wouldn't allow her to say anything more. He really was a headache like the little one. Xin Haoyue couldn't be bothered to argue with him and just watch the child. His eyes were big and round and his skin was fair and supple. The more she looked at him, the more delighted she felt. The baby was so cute. Xin Haoyue held the baby and suddenly felt like saying, I never dared to think that I would be able to hold him in my arms one day. The nightmares of those days, finding herself in the darkness, crying helplessly alone without being able to find the direction while her child was crying so hard, and being unable to find him now, seemed like such a far-off thing. Once a person obtained happiness, all the painful past of suffering seems to become blurred and faded into nothingness. The past that one had lived through was gone. It was no longer important. When she heard her speak with such sentiment, Xinan hugged her shoulder and said, We're always here. Yeah, I'll never let you go. Me neither. Xin Haoyue brought the baby into her embrace and felt that her life was finally complete. She was very content with this. Xinan was very good in many ways, only he was picky with people and had a big temper. Usually, after falling asleep at night, he wouldn't make much noise unless he was hungry, but he needed Xin Haoyue and Xinan to hold him and coax him to sleep every night, which was a real struggle for the elders. Xin Haoyue had to record a TV show one night and would be back by around 11 p.m. Xinan, on the other hand, had an important dinner party and couldn't stay at home. With the couple out together, Chen-an played liftoff with Chen-an for a very long time, and he was giggling the whole time. It wasn't until Chen-an didn't even have the energy in his arms to lift him anymore than old Grandpa Chen took the baby from him. He put him down on his laps and made faces at the baby. But old Grandpa Chen's techniques may not be so great. After staring at him expressionlessly for a moment, they weren't sure whether Chen-an disliked it or was scared, but he began crying. And when he started, nobody could coax him better. Wang Yinlin saw him cry so hard that his eyes were red and even his nose had turned red as well, and she quickly asked Chen-an to call the two to hurry home. Xin Haoyue was busy recording the program, so she didn't even realize her phone rang many times. Xinan was currently talking about the most important points with his partners, and when he saw the caller ID for the old home, the first thing he thought was that it must be related to Chen-an. Sure enough, he heard his son's earth-shattering cries as soon as the call connected. After listening to Chen-an's explanation, Xinan quickly hung up and told his partners that he had to go home first. Then, he quickly left, leaving Assistant Wang to clean up the mess. On the way home, Xinan called Xin Haoyue many times, but she never picked up. So frowning, he rushed back home. As soon as he arrived, he saw the three elders surrounding Chen-an, trying their best to coax the baby. Even Aunt Song was breaking up a sweat from trying to tease him. But Chen-an still wasn't having any of it and wailed as loud as he could. Xinan frowned. He quickly took off his suit jacket that smelled of alcohol and tobacco and quickly went over to hold him. After picking him up, Xinan began coaxing him, and the baby's cries gradually went down. Seeing him sobbing with tears all over his face, Xinan quickly told Wang Yinlin to get a tissue to help wipe his face. While going as light as possible, Wang Yinlin said, This child, you really scared all of us. Then, when she saw Chen-an blinking his pitiful eyes, she felt her heart ache and didn't dare to say any more. Instead, she turned to talk about her son instead. What's with you anyway? You have managers and executives all over your company. What sort of dinner was so important that you had to go yourself? Next time, just hurry home after work. If my grandson cries like this anymore, what am I going to do if he can't breathe? Well, she's right. Chen Qinan practically never took any breaks when he begins crying. And this was the reason why the elders had to summon them back in a hurry. Hearing that, Chen Xinan looked speechlessly at the one in his arms and said, "Got it, Mom." After the show, Xin Haoyue was just about to change when she heard someone call out to her. "Host Xin, your phone rang a lot of times earlier. Was there an emergency?" Xin Haoyue thanked them and took her phone. As soon as she saw the name, she felt a sense of urgency and immediately called Chen Xinan back. "Did something happen at home?" "Yeah, but it's fine now. Are you off work?" Xin Haoyue quickly asked. "Did something happen to Anan?" Chen Xinan turned around to look at the little guy who was sleeping happily in bed and responded, "Not anymore. He just cried really hard when we weren't around, but he's asleep now." Xin Haoyue's heart clenched when she heard his words, but she breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that he fell asleep. "That's good." Chen Xinan asked, "Are you done with work?" "Yeah, the recording's done. I'm just about to head home." "Wait for me after you pack up. I'll come pick you up." Xin Haoyue said, "No need, I drove here this morning. It's already dark. I'm worried." When she heard him say this, Xin Haoyue's heart felt warm. Smiling, she said, "All right, I'll be troubling you then, President Chen." Chen Xinan also had a smile on his face. "Anything for my wife." After picking her up, Chen Xinan brought her for supper. By the time they returned home, it was nearly 12 p.m. Xin Haoyue went into the room and saw Chen Qinan sleeping deeply. She couldn't help but touch his small little hand and whispered to Chen Xinan behind her, "Why don't I quit my job?" Chen Xinan, who was distracted, looked at her and said, "What? The baby only recognizes you and me. If he ever cries again like today when both of us are away at work, what's going to happen to him if we didn't pay attention to our phones or didn't come home in time?" Naturally, Xin Haoyue knew how her child was like. If he started crying hard at night, then he definitely wouldn't stop easily without them around to calm him down. "He's still young, it'll be bad if he cries like this," Xin Haoyue added. Chen Xinan's face paled. Naturally, he knew this was bad, but he said, "Isn't this career your dream? Besides, you're currently on an upswing. Are you sure you won't regret it if you resign?" Xin Haoyue looked at the child and said, "Maybe I will, but compared to work, I want to take care of my child." Chen Xinan was quiet for a moment. He walked forward and reached out to hold her slender waist and said, "Forget it, let me make that sacrifice instead." "What do you mean?" Xin Haoyue was surprised. "Since someone has to be there at night to take care of the kid, I'll do it. As for work, I'll try to settle everything during the day." But how would Xin Haoyue not be aware of the amount of stress he had to take on when he was in charge of such a large company? "No, let me do it. You have so many things to. If you're working overtime, I'll rush back as soon as I can. But if not, I'll just see how the situation's like." This was the best way to do it. The two of them will work out their schedules. Xin Haoyue thought about it and knew that this was the best idea. "Let's do that then," she agreed. "Yeah." Chen Xinan, I just realized how difficult it is to be a parent to a growing child. Even if you have a lot of elders to help take care of the child, you'll still think about your child all the time during work and be worried about whether something would happen to them. We're still young. We can slowly learn how to become a good mother and father for the baby. Xin Haoyue nodded. She turned slightly in his arms, smiling and looking at him for a long moment before reaching her arms behind his neck and kissing him with her eyes closed. Chen Xinan wrapped her arms around her waist and lowered his head to match her, tangling their lips and tongues together. Xin Haoyue gasped at the eagerness of his kiss and reached out to give him a gentle punch on the shoulder. Chen Xinan chuckled and loosened his hold. Squeezing her nose, he said, "Even though you seduced me first." Xin Haoyue blushed and glared at him. Proudly, she denied. "I just gave you a kiss. You call that seducing you?" "Isn't it? Then what would you consider seduction?" Xin Haoyue was speechless. At least. Chen Xinan observed her face, which was growing hotter and hotter. When he lowered his head to kiss her, he whispered, "I'll be waiting for you to broaden my horizons." Then he smiled and added, "So don't keep me waiting too long, Mrs. Chen." After learning how to run, Chen Qinan liked to run all over the place. Xin Haoyue followed behind him to watch over him, and she felt her back aching after the day. At night, when Chen Xinan held her and was intimate with her, Xin Haoyue avoided it and said, "I'm tired. Can you let me have a good sleep tonight?" Chen Xinan didn't understand. She was at home resting all day, so how could she be tired? But when he asked, he found out it was related to that little brat Chen Qinan. The next day, he said to her, "I'll watch the kids so you rest." Xin Haoyue thought about her own heavy workload from Monday and nodded, saying to him reassuredly, "I'll leave the child to you then." "Yeah, go sleep." Xin Haoyue nodded and went back into the room. But she didn't have a very restful sleep either. She woke up in less than an hour. She got up and headed downstairs only to find Chen Qinan sitting in the middle of the living room with a big pile of toys around him. Xin Haoyue took a look at Chen Chenan, who was wearing a red short-sleeved shirt, arranging toy car after toy car in a serious manner. Smiling, she called out to him, "Anan, Mommy, Mommy." When Chenan saw her coming downstairs, he waved the toy car in his hands excitedly. "Car." Xin Haoyue smiled at him. "Mommy knows, Anan. Go ahead and play." Chen Chenan looked at her, then at Chen Xinan. After giving them a sweet smile, he continued arranging his toy cars. When Xin Haoyue saw Chen Xinan sitting on the sofa looking at his laptop, when she sat down next to him, Chen Xinan put his laptop back on the table. Xin Haoyue laid quietly in his arms while Chen Xinan reached his arms over her shoulders and holding her other hand, playing with it in his hands. Xin Haoyue quickly turned to look at Chen Chenan. Seeing him with his back towards her, focused on his toys, she couldn't help but feel relieved. Chen Xinan joked, "It's not like you're doing something sneaky. What are you being so tense for?" Xin Haoyue looked up at him and whispered, "The kid is still around." "Shh." Chen Xinan chuckled. "It's not like we're doing anything. I'm just holding you." And what is your hand doing?" Xin Haoyue grabbed his hand that was making its way up her clothes and constantly causing trouble. Being seen through, Chen Xinan lowered his head and gave her a deep kiss before chuckling. "Give me a kiss then." "Hey, can't we have a proper talk anymore?" After he was done kissing her, Xin Haoyue temporarily felt relieved, since it didn't seem like he was going to continue. Curling up in his arms, she asked, "So how did you get him to sit there and play by himself obediently?" Chen Xinan didn't think much of it. "If I don't let him play by himself, did you want me to chase around him the whole day just like you?" His words really were piercing. Xin Haoyue was unhappy. "He likes to run around. What am I going to do if he hurts himself if I don't follow him?" Chen Xinan looked at her. "Heh, so anything is fine as long as you're pampering the child, Of course." Chen Xinan was slightly dissatisfied. "Even if you love him, you can't pamper him too much. He'll be spoiled sooner or later." Xin Haoyue said, "I know when to stop." Chen Xinan was not fully convinced. Then he said, "We'll see how it goes." "Xin Haoyue?" She couldn't match him in the speech game, so she hit him with the pillow beside her instead. Chen Xinan was completely mystified at being hit, so he pressed her down on the sofa and tickled her. And how could Xin Haoyue bear it? She quickly admitted her wrong and called for mercy. "You want me to let you go? Maybe in your next life." That sounds like a familiar TV line. Xin Haoyue paused for a moment, but she quickly said, I was wrong. I was wrong. See if you still dare to. Play, play." When Chen Chenan saw the two of them, he quickly ran over while still holding a toy car, bouncing happily. As soon as they heard the noise, they immediately stopped. Both of them looked at each other, and they both had to restrain themselves a little. The weather was beautiful in the afternoon, so Xin Haoyue proposed going to the mall together. With Chen Xinan as the driver, they arrived at the mall, and he also carried the baby the whole way through, patiently accompanying Xin Haoyue and doing his own browsing as well. It must be because he inherited the strong genes of his parents, but he was really a beautiful child, and the family of three attracted the gazes of many passers-by along the way. After some people recognized Xin Haoyue, they began following them from afar. Chen Xinan saw the few college girls following him from behind, and he frowned. He said to Xin Haoyue, who was looking at men's shirts, "It's difficult having a famous wife after all. We're being followed by so many people." Even though Xin Haoyue wasn't paying attention to what was happening behind her, she could still tell from sound alone that she had been recognized. Smiling, she measured the shirt with Chen Xinan's body and said, "Hey, don't push it all on me. Even without me, I think your face alone will still turn a lot of heads." Chen Xinan smiled proudly. "If I'm not handsome enough to keep my wife, then that'll be a real problem. Yeah, President Chen is right. So what you're saying, Mrs. Chen, is that you're only with me because of my looks?" Xin Haoyue? Isn't this topic jumping a little fast? Xin Haoyue ignored him. But at night, when a certain someone was tossing and turning her all over, he whispered by her ear, "Tell me, what do you love about me?" "I love your." Xin Haoyue gripped the sheets tightly with one hand while she bit her lower lip. Even her speech was as soft as her body. She was completely exhausted. "My what?" Chen Xinan ground against her, refusing to give her a break. Xin Haoyue couldn't stand it anymore and bit his arm. So now Chen Xinan had even more reasons to torment her. With that, he caused Xin Haoyue to be 2 hours late to work the next day. When Chen Xinan was still half asleep, he heard her in a hurry to pack up her things, and he muttered, "It's so early, why don't you sleep a little longer?" When she heard what he said, Xin Haoyue was so pissed that she returned to the bed and reached out to pinch his nose. "Oof, it's this late and you still say it's early. I'm already late because of you, Chen Xinan." Chen Xinan reached out to hug her, trying to drag her back into the covers. "Take the day off then." "I can't." Seeing her insistence on going to work, Chen Xinan sat up and said in a muffled voice, "I'll send you." "No need, you should continue sleeping. I'll go myself." "Be careful on the road then." "Okay, I'll call you when I arrive." Seeing that she had left, Chen Xinan continued sleeping for a while, before heading to work. At 4 in the afternoon, Xin Haoyue received a call from Assistant Wang. "Madam, President Chen has a fever. I advised him several times, but he wouldn't go to the hospital." "A fever?" Xin Haoyue thought about it, and decided that it must be due to what they did last night. Did he take any medicine? Xin Haoyue asked. President Chen said he was fine and wouldn't take any. Xin Haoyue thought about it for a bit and responded, all right, I understand. Chen Xinan was currently in a meeting when the door was suddenly opened by someone. Just as he was about to ask who dared to interrupt the meeting, he saw his secretary bowing and apologizing before quickly saying, President Chen, the madam says she needs you urgently for something, so I didn't dare delay. When he saw indeed that Xin Haoyue was right behind her, he quickly turned around and asked, Why are you here? Xin Haoyue responded, I needed you urgently for something. Do you mind availing yourself for a moment? Chen Xinan nodded and ordered them to continue the meeting. Then, he took her hand and headed back into his office. As soon as the door was closed, Chen Xinan got rid of his expressionless mask and asked with a smile, Honey, why are you here? If I didn't come, I'm just worried I'd have to see you in the hospital tonight. Chen Xinan seemed to have understood something. Assistant Wang must have called her earlier. I'm fine, honey. Don't listen to Assistant Wang, he's just getting worked up over nothing. Xin Haoyue got on her tiptoes and touched his forehead. I'll judge for myself if you're fine or not. Now, be good and go sit down on the chair. Chen Xinan was speechless. Isn't this the same tone she uses when she's coaxing her son? When Xin Haoyue came over, she had already prepared everything. First, she took his temperature. It was 38.7 degrees Celsius. As soon as Xin Haoyue saw the number, her tone was serious. You have such a serious fever and you still say you're fine? First, take the medicine. Then she passed him some medicine and water. Chen Xinan looked at it for a while and said, I don't need it. It'll go down on its own after tomorrow. No, I'm worried. Those simple words caused Chen Xinan to surrender. After taking the medicine, Xin Haoyue went home with him. Immediately, she pushed him into the room and told him to sleep for a while. He'll only get better after sweating it out for a bit. Even if he was convinced that nothing was wrong with him, Chen Xinan could only comply when he saw how anxious she looked. After waking up from his nap, the sky had already turned dark. As soon as Chen Xinan sat up, Xin Haoyue brought him some clear congee. Awake? How do you feel? Here, have some congee. Then, when she saw no reaction from him, she looked up at him. But then, Chen Xinan laughed and slowly said, Sure enough, it's nice to be married. Seeing that he was starting to get funny again, Xin Haoyue said, Huh? You just realized that? I know it well. Stop messing around and eat your food. Chen Xinan thought that sure enough, life is only complete when you have a caring person to live with you through the years. At the end of the year, Xin Haoyue and Chen Xinan attended an award ceremony together. When they walked down the red carpet fully dressed up, cheers went up all around them. During the red carpet interview, a reporter asked Chen Xinan how he felt about the debut. Chen Xinan was not very compliant and said, No comments. Xin Haoyue, who was holding his arm, nearly let out a laugh. The reporter was speechless for half a minute before turning the mic to Xin Haoyue instead. Host Xin, do you think you'll win anything this award ceremony? Xin Haoyue responded very briefly. If fate wills it. It would be lucky if she did, but it would only be normal if she didn't get it. It was all up to fate. Fortunately, the results were satisfactory and Xin Haoyue won the Golden Microphone Award. After heading on stage to get her award and to give her acceptance speech, Xin Haoyue thanked everyone, especially those she loved. The camera panned to Chen Xinan's face that was smiling lightly, instantly triggering a scream from the audience. Xin Haoyue met his warm gaze and continued. Thank you for coming into my life. I asked you what you would do if I wasn't by my side, and you told me that the only person you'll love in your life is me. Today, I would also like to take this opportunity to say, I love you. The more grown-up Chen Xinan was, the naughtier he got. Except for the times when he was taking afternoon naps or sleeping at night, he practically never sat still for a moment. He would play from upstairs to downstairs, then run from downstairs back upstairs again, throwing his toys and stuff everywhere. As soon as Xin Haoyue saw how messed up the house was, she put on a stern face and called out to him. Chen Xinan! Mommy, mommy! After hearing her voice, Chen Xinan quickly ran over and held up the toys Mao Xiong gave him. Xin Haoyue had a headache. Didn't mommy tell you to pack up your toys after playing with them and put them back into their original places? Mommy, I'm not done playing yet, the little one argued. You've been playing all day, Xin Haoyue reminded. Mommy, I'll keep it later. Xin Haoyue told him sternly, if you don't clean up now, Daddy will clean you up once he gets back. Her use of the word clean had two different meanings in that sentence. Chen Xinan blinked his big round eyes as if struggling to make sense of his mommy's words. But he understood that he wouldn't be able to play around so willfully as when he was alone at home with his mommy once his daddy comes back. After Chen Xinan turned 3, Xin Haoyue and Chen Xinan would take him back to their own home on the weekends. Chen Xinan had just started on a new project today, so he had left the house early in the morning in his suit. When Chen Xinan woke up and heard that his dad wasn't home, he played even more vigorously. But now, hearing his dad's name made his face turn sour. He asked Xin Haoyue, Is Daddy getting off work? Xin Haoyue leaned down and squeezed his chubby cheeks. She nodded. Yeah, Daddy sent Mommy a message saying he's on the way, so are you going to put your toys back where they belong? Chen Xinan blinked his eyes, feeling a little frustrated. But he could only lower his head and respond unhappily. Okay, Mommy. For Chen Chenan, the only person he was afraid of in this world was Chen Xinan. It might be the way he criticized him with an emotionless face, but after getting scared once, the little guy didn't dare to disobey anything Chen Xinan said ever again. But he was also mad at his daddy. Whenever daddy wasn't home, he could sleep in with mommy on that big comfy bed. But once daddy comes back, he'll definitely carry him back to his own room. So, Chen Chenan always thought, daddy's really petty, he won't let me sleep with mommy. As soon as he thought of this, Chen Chenan, who was putting his toys back into their box, ran over to Xin Haoyue's side and tugged on her sleeves. Mommy, mommy! What's wrong? Do you need mommy to help you clean up? Chen Chenan scratched his head and thought about it for a moment. Then he said happily, Yeah. All right, let's clean up together then. Xin Haoyue stroked his head and smiled. When Chen Chenan entered the house, he just happened to see the two of them cleaning up the toys on the floor. Chen Chenan was playing while he cleaned up, and he saw his tall daddy come in as soon as he looked up, so he quickly tossed the things in his hands and ran over. Daddy! 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 Chen Xinan, who was taking his suit jacket off, stopped. He reached out to pet Chen Chenan, who had latched onto his leg, and asked, Were you a good boy today? Did you listen to your mommy? Yeah, Chen Chenan nodded strongly. Then I'll ask your mommy later. If mommy says no, then I'll leave you home alone tonight. Chen Chenan remembered that his daddy and mommy told him this morning they needed to go over to Grandma and Grandpa's house in the evening. So he hurriedly ran back and pulled Xin Haoyue, who had just bent over to pick up the toy he tossed away in front of Chen Xinan, and said proudly, Mommy, I've been good, right, Mommy? You sneaky little, you've been very good. Mommy and Daddy will bring you with us tonight, Xin Haoyue responded as he wished. Hooray! Chen Chenan said excitedly. Grandpa's house has turtles! Turtles! After Xinjin found out that Chen Chenan liked small animals, he ended up raising many small animals, such as white rabbits and so on. A while ago, he also started raising some fish and turtles. But he had no idea that Chen Chenan didn't actually like animals at all. He just liked bullying them. When Chen Chenan first saw the little kitten in the Xin family's home, he began chasing after it enthusiastically for the whole day, just like a dog chasing after a flock of chickens. Even the garden where Bai Ning spent so much effort planting all her expensive flowers were spoiled beyond recognition. After finding that out, Xin Haoyue brought him to one corner of the living room and lectured him, telling him to apologize to his grandparents and to make sure he wouldn't do it again. But then, Chen Chenan cried and argued, Mommy is biased, the kitty was wrong too. Why aren't you scolding it? Xin Haoyue was absolutely speechless. In the end, she was so pissed that she really didn't know whether she should laugh or cry. It was enough if Xinjin and Bai Ning just stood at the side and didn't help, but they were very accepting of his behavior. It's fine, Anan, it's all right. The flowers are just gone. I can plant new ones. Everything's fine as long as Anan is happy. Chen Chenan immediately dried his tears and smiled. Grandpa, Grandma, Anan is very happy. The little kitty ran so fast, Anan couldn't even catch up. Xin Shancheng, who had just walked over, was completely oblivious. Anan, if you can't catch up, then just try a few more times. Try harder, you'll catch it someday. Even though Chen Chenan couldn't understand the deeper meanings of his words, what he did know was that his grandparents and uncle were on his side. So, every time they went back to the Xin family home, Chen Chenan would play to his heart's content. Xinjin raised a small turtle, a very cute one. Chen Chenan loved teasing it or putting the turtle into the fish tank, watching it swim with the goldfishes. Then he would reach out to catch the turtle or the goldfish while they were unaware. Seeing them scurrying around made Chen Chenan smiled heartily. When the three members of the Chen Xinan's family arrived at the Xin family door, Chen Chenan said especially proudly to Chen Xinan, Daddy, Uncle said he'll buy me a car. I can drive a little car in the garden. Hearing that, Xin Haoyue asked, Don't you already have several at home? It's different. This one's from Uncle? Chen Xinan looked at him and touched his head. Then you sleep together with Uncle tonight, okay? Without even thinking, Chen Anan said, Don't wanna. Why not? Chen Xinan asked. Chen Chenan stared at him, but he couldn't find a reason why. Chen Xinan went on, You see, Uncle bought you so many gifts and even wants to give you a car today, but you don't have a gift for Uncle, do you? If Uncle likes you so much, I'm sure Uncle will be very happy if you slept with him. Xin Haoyue laughed. Hey, what are you doing? Nothing, Chen Xinan responded in all seriousness. Xin Haoyue glanced at him. Who wouldn't realize what he was trying to do tonight? He definitely has a bad reason for trying desperately to coax his son into sleeping together with Xin Qiancheng. Hey, can you lay back a little? My brother's still unmarried. How would he know how to take care of a child? It's better for Anan to sleep with us at night. Chen Xinan looked sadly at her and said, Then let him sleep with Mom. Mom has some experience in taking care of children at least. Xin Haoyue eyed him and shook her head helplessly. She didn't even feel like talking to him anymore. Xin Haoyue saw Bai Ning was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she entered the room. Therefore, she offered to help while Chen Xinan and Xin Jin were playing in the garden with Chen Chenan. After Chen Chenan had enough playing of the car Xin Qiancheng gifted him, he eagerly ran back into the living room while announcing that he wanted to play with the goldfish and little turtle. Xin Haoyue poured a glass of water for him to drink, and he gurgled a whole half glass of it in one shot. Mommy, I'm done drinking. I'm going to play now. Before Xin Haoyue could wipe his sweat for him, he ran off to play. Slow down. Seeing that Chen Qinan wasn't even paying attention to his feet, Xin Haoyue hurriedly reminded. She brought the glass back into the kitchen as Bai Ning smiled. I really like Anan. Not only was he really cute, but he was also very smart and a smooth talker. Even more, he was healthy and carefree. Xin Haoyue wanted to reply when she heard Bai Ning ask, have you thought of getting Anan a brother or sister? Xin Haoyue froze when she heard this. She hadn't heard Chen Xinan or Chen family's elders mention bearing an extra child. However, she did receive an invitation from Zhong Qin and Zhuang Zhao 2 days ago. Zhong Qin talked about how she was 3 months pregnant and casually mentioned, Xin Haoyue, why don't you and Chen Xinan have a second child too? That way, our kids can have playmates. I like the idea of getting childhood sweethearts for my kids. She clearly remembered Chen Xinan talking about his fondness for daughters. Bai Ning was lost in her thought. She then asked, what's the matter? Did something happen between you and Xinan? Bai Ning couldn't even believe her own question. Right? That's impossible. The two visited Xin family whenever they had time, unless Chen Xinan was extremely busy. They always traveled in pairs. When Bai Ning occasionally glanced at them, their gazes were full of gentleness and tenderness for each other. How could there be problems in their relationship? But Bai Ning didn't understand. The two were still young. Anan was also very adorable and healthy. Why aren't the two thinking about getting a second child? Seeing how worried Bai Ning was, Xin Haoyue hurriedly comforted. Mother, you're overthinking. We have a great relationship. Nothing happened. Then, Mother, let's just go with the flow. Bai Ning could only reply, Chen family is known for having only one child in each generation. After all, Anan would be very lonely by himself. He'd be quite lively with another brother or sister in the family, however. Xin Haoyue tugged the corner of her lips up. Mother, I understand. In the evening, Chen Qinan pestered Xin Haoyue to sleep with him. Bai Ning originally wanted to coax him to sleep with her, but Chen Qinan refused. Therefore, Xin Haoyue said, Mother, let him sleep with us. He isn't well behaved in his sleep. Don't make it so that you have trouble sleeping because of him. It's just one night, it's all right. Mother, it's okay, just let him sleep with us. She followed her to have her way. Chen Qinan played quite a bit earlier, so he fell asleep quickly. Seeing that he was deep in sleep, Xin Haoyue tucked a corner of his blanket in. Chen Xinan walked out of the bathroom to see the bedroom quiet and silent. He lowered his voice and asked, asleep? Yeah. Xin Haoyue got up and originally wanted to grab her clothes to go into the bathroom to shower. Seeing that Chen Xinan was wiping his hair, she reached over to grab his dry towel to dry his hair. Chen Xinan smiled and said, Wifey, you're great. Xin Haoyue also smiled. Right, as long as you know. After that, she tried to get everything out in one breath. Mother just asked me a question. What? Mother asked me why we aren't planning for a second child for Anan. After she finished, Xin Haoyue stopped and looked at his rear view. She quietly waited for him to answer. Chen Xinan grabbed her hands and asked, Are you happy with the life we have right now? Yes, Xin Haoyue said truthfully. So let's maintain this state for now. I have Anan, so I'm satisfied. Xin Haoyue retorted, But didn't you say you want a cute daughter when we were planning to have Anan? I don't want one anymore. He almost said this without hesitation. Xin Haoyue was expressionless when she heard that. She looked at him, wanting to find traces of him joking around, but unfortunately she didn't. He wore a serious expression, unprecedented seriousness. Xin Haoyue felt a bit awkward. You really don't want another child? He responded firmly. No. Xin Haoyue's eyes teared up a bit. She lowered her head and didn't want to talk. Chen Xinan got up and hugged her. It's enough that we have Anan, wifey. Chen Xinan didn't continue the rest of his words. Xin Haoyue also tugged the corner of her lips, pretending to be calm. I understand. Chen Xinan watched as she struggled free from his hug and entered the bathroom. He stood in the empty room, not knowing what to do. He looked back to see his precious son in bed. He reached over to pat his soft hair, but he said nothing in the end. When they ate breakfast the next day, Bai Ning could clearly feel the strange distant feeling between Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue. They didn't make any eye contact during the entire breakfast. Up until they were about to go, Chen Xinan asked Xin Haoyue, Can we go now? Yeah. Bai Ning, Xin Jin, and Xin Chencheng looked at each other, having the instinct that something happened. When Chen Xinan drove the car over, Xin Chencheng specially followed behind. You fought with my sister? No. Chen Xinan answered directly. Then what's going on between you two? Nothing. Xin Chencheng didn't believe him, so he questioned again. Seeing that Xin Chencheng persisted on getting an answer, he replied, I won't let her get into any accidents again. What do you mean? Xin Chencheng just asked this when he heard Chen Chenin call out loudly. Daddy, Daddy, why aren't you ready yet? You're so slow. Uncle, are you leaving with us? Xin Chencheng replied, No, Uncle isn't coming. I'll visit you when I have time. Okay, Anan will be waiting for Uncle. Okay. Xin Chencheng sent them away, and as expected, he heard his parents discuss what happened between Haoyue and Xinan. Bai Ning stopped for a while before thinking and guessing. Could it be about the child? What about the child? Xin Jin asked. I just asked Siwei why she didn't plan on having another child yesterday. Anan is very cute. It'd be perfect if he gains another sister or brother. Xinjin thought about it before replying. It's their business whether to have another child or not. They will make their own decision. Don't ask them in the future. Xin Chen connected everything and seemed to understand why Chen Xinan didn't want a child. He already went through a terrifying experience when Siwei gave birth to Anan. He was scared, not sure whether they'd be as lucky the next time or if there would be a miracle still. However, Xin Siwei didn't understand. Their relationship had cooled a bit, and Chen family's elders naturally detected it too. When Wang Yinlin was shopping with her, she brought it up. Did Nan do something bad to you recently? What? Xin Siwei thought about it and replied, no. Then what happened between the two of you guys? Mother, I have been wanting another child, but he refuses. Ever since Xin Siwei returned from Xin family, she had shamelessly worn sexy outfits and gotten intimate with Chen Xinan a few times. However, he didn't forget to take the safety precautions before the last step. Xin Siwei felt incredibly defeated. In the end, she didn't even bother to cooperate with him. Chen Xinan was quite straightforward. He just purely hugged her to sleep. Xin Siwei never questioned their relationship, but where did this invisible distancing come from? Wang Yinlin thought about it before testing the waters. Nan got acquainted with another woman outside? Xin Siwei smiled and said, Mother, I'm not worried about this. I'm sure that he'll naturally talk to me about it if he finds another woman he likes. Plus, he's not a man like that. Wang Yinlin didn't know whether to be glad or what. It was a good thing the two trusted in their relationship, but regarding the child, he actually mentioned this to us before. Wang Yinlin pondered over it before deciding to tell her. Mother? As his mother, I saw clearly how he definitely would have gone crazy if you hadn't woken up after you gave birth to Anan, especially after you slept for such a long time. Thankfully, you woke up later on. Wang Yinlin said meaningfully. When Anan turned 2, I talked to him about having another child. He told me that he just wants Anan because he was scared of the same thing happening twice. The risk is too big. He is actually very afraid of that happening again. The risk is too big, and he is actually very afraid of that happening again. Xin Siwei felt sour and bitter in her heart when she heard this. It wasn't that he didn't love children, but that he was too scared to gamble. It was too risky to him. Chen Xinan was scared of the same thing happening. He lost her once already, so he was unwilling to lose her again. Even if he only has Anan, life has been good to him. Xin Siwei thought that she was too selfish and forgot how badly she had hurt him by leaving last time. Chen Xinan was afraid of a repeat of the same events. If he had to experience losing her again, he'd rather not have a second child. Chen Xinan received Xin Siwei's call in the afternoon at the company. The two were both quiet when they picked up. After a few dozens of seconds, Chen Xinan gave in and asked, What are you doing? Xin Siwei glanced at the closed fitting room. She lowered her voice and said, I'm shopping with your mother. Chen Xinan became quiet. Xin Siwei considered it for a while before asking, Are you going home after work? Yes. Chen Xinan. Come to our home after work, I'm waiting for you. Chen Xinan wanted to ask why, but she hurriedly hung up. He was shocked, wondering if something happened. However, when he returned, he noticed that it was quiet everywhere except for the sound of the kitchen hood. Chen Xinan followed the noise to see her wearing a flowery apron cooking. Xin Siwei smiled when she saw him. You're back? Is today a special occasion? Chen Xinan asked. Every day is important when I'm with you. Her words of love seemed to have broken the silence and indifference between the two of them. Chen Xinan looked behind him and noticed that Chen Chenan wasn't here. He lifted his brows and asked, Just the two of us? Xin Siwei slightly lifted her head. Isn't that good? That's great. Chen Xinan suddenly recalled that the two hadn't spent some time together ever since Anan was born. The two spent their time at work, and with Anan, Xin Siwei had spent quite a bit of thought on this candlelit dinner. The candlelight swayed gently. Chen Xinan unbuttoned the buttons on his collar, and he tugged on it. Glancing at the table of delicious dishes, his instinct was that Xin Siwei was going to discuss something really important, and he knew very well what this had to do with. However, he didn't have the courage to have a second child, no matter how much he wanted one. Every day is important when I'm with you. But compared to the child, he'd rather her be safe and stay by his side forever. He was already satisfied that she gave him a healthy and cute and lively Anan. What are you thinking about? Chen Xinan's gaze landed on Xin Siwei's slender fingers on his shoulder, and up to see her wearing a revealing low-cut purple long dress. Chen Xinan held her hands. Are you trying to seduce me by wearing such beautiful clothes? What? Are you unwilling? Chen Xinan watched as her smile slowly faded, then he gradually replied, Why would I be? I'm naturally happy that I get such a beautiful woman. Xin Siwei looked at him and smiled charmingly. Chen Xinan slightly tugged her firmly and she fell onto his thigh. He glanced down the collar of her dress to see that the long dress had a split. Because of the way she was positioned, it revealed her slender, long, and fair legs. Chen Xinan laughed and landed a kiss on her collarbone right then. He asked, in a low voice, Mrs. Chen, what are you plotting by doing all of this? Xin Siwei wrinkled his shirt and unbuttoned a button. She thought that was still not enough, so she secretly unbuttoned another one. Chen Xinan looked down to see her teasing him. He got up and carried her to the dining table. This startled Xin Haoyue. She hurriedly covered his lips, which was about to cover hers. She reminded him, "We haven't eaten yet. Aren't you the most delicious dish?" Chen Xinan retorted. Xin Haoyue's face flushed, not helping her situation. However, she clenched her teeth and still bravely looked up at him. In a gentle voice, "You can eat me later. I want to dance for you." Huh? When we just got married, didn't you want me to dance for you alone when you saw a video of me dancing? However, we were too busy, so I never got to dance for you. Let me do it now, okay? Chen Xinan looked at her with a fiery gaze. In the end, he said, "Okay." Xin Haoyue chose a soft and gentle song. When the music began, she started dancing to it. Her movements were gentle and beautiful, charming. Chen Xinan's gaze was trained on her. Her slender legs vaguely revealed itself through the dress and made her look even more charming. When the music ended, Xin Haoyue slightly sighed. Needless to say, it was a bit difficult to dance in such sexy clothes. Meanwhile, Chen Xinan's thoughtful gaze made her extremely nervous. She calmed her breathing and asked, "Do I look beautiful?" "Yes," Chen Xinan answered easily before saying, "Come here and eat." His indifferent tone diminished Xin Haoyue's passion by half. She sat down and watched as Chen Xinan poured red wine into his glass. Then she said emotionally, "I want to drink too." "You can't." "Why?" Xin Haoyue placed her chopsticks down and didn't even bother to look at him. She stared at the candlelight across him and suppressed her emotions. "You never care about my feelings. Even if I know you're doing this for my sake, you never ask whether I'm willing to follow your way of thinking." Chen Xinan. She trembled as she said the last few words. Lately, Chen Xinan had been in a very gloomy mood. Seeing that she finally cut to the chase, he gazed at her to see her shoulders slightly trembling and crying silently. In that moment, his heart softened. "Wifey." Xin Haoyue ignored him and continued to cry silently. Chen Xinan stood up and brought her into his arms. "If you want to drink, then go ahead." Xin Haoyue wrapped her arms around him. "I want a child. Will you give me one?" Chen Xinan stayed silent before persisting. "It's enough that we have Anan. But I want another child. She can look like you or me. Haoyue? Chen Xinan, I won't leave again, never. I already died in that world. I'm not going anywhere without you. I will be good this time." "No. Why?" "I can't let anything happen to you. Chen Xinan, let's not have another child. Anan is enough, okay? Wifey?" "No." Xin Haoyue responded decisively. Chen Xinan reached over to touch her face. In a low voice, "If something happens to you, I'll crumble. By then, what should we do with Anan? You still don't believe that I'll be safe and sound?" "No, I'm scared of gambling it, Chen Xinan. I will never let you win on this." Xin Haoyue spent so much effort and prepared that long, but ended up failing to make Chen Xinan touched. The two weren't as close as they were back then because of this matter. Today, Gu Tong arrived at Shengjin City. Xin Haoyue and Zhong Qin met up with her. During lunch, Gu Yong mentioned Zhong Qin's bulging stomach and then teased Xin Haoyue to get another child as well. Xin Haoyue said helplessly, "I want one, but I don't have a choice." "What do you mean? Didn't you already give birth to Anan?" Xin Haoyue knew that they misunderstood. She explained, "I'm not talking about my body. I ended up unconscious for a long time after I gave birth to Anan. Chen Xin doesn't want me to become pregnant again." The two glanced at each other after they heard her words. Indeed, this helpless and desperate feeling would make one feel on the verge of crumbling down. However, Gu Tong understood Chen Xinan. "I think it makes sense why he feels this way. After all, even I felt pitiful towards him when he didn't wake up back then." It wasn't like Zhong Qin could say anything. To Chen Xinan, it goes without saying whether the child or Xin Haoyue was more important. Therefore, she put in a few good words. "Chen Xinan was worried about you. He wouldn't be able to accept it if something happened to you." Xin Haoyue smiled. She understood, but she was sure that she'd be fine this time. Xin Haoyue was worried for many days. On a certain night, when she was looking through information, an idea popped in her mind. Therefore, she went online to Google. "If your partner doesn't want a child, what do I do to get pregnant?" She ended up getting all sorts of strange answers. Xin Haoyue looked at the answers and finally found a practical and good working method. Therefore, in the next 3 months, Chen Xinan noticed that Xin Haoyue was much more passionate in bed. She stopped mentioning having a second child with him either. It seemed as though the two never had a Cold War. During the Lunar New Year's Eve, Xin Haoyue helped prepare a sumptuous New Year's Eve family dinner. When everyone gathered around to eat, Chen Chenan, who used to take off his red hat, was happily opening up the red envelope Grandfather Chen prepared for him. Xin Haoyue ladled soup for her. Seeing that he was still holding the red envelope and refusing to let go, she reminded Anan, "Look later, eat first." Chen Chenan hid the red envelope behind her obediently. He said happily, "Mommy, Grandfather gave me a big envelope." "Then did you thank Grandfather?" "Yes." Everyone heard his response loudly and clearly. They couldn't help but laugh. "He's really a money grubber." Chen Xinan ladled fish soup for Xin Haoyue. "You should eat as well. Don't mind him, okay?" Xin Haoyue smiled. She picked up the soup and took a sip, then scrunched her brows. "It doesn't taste good?" Chen Xinan hurriedly asked when he saw her expression. Xin Haoyue shook her head and covered her mouth, hurriedly running to the bathroom. Before the elders could react, Chen Xinan chased after her. In the bathroom, Xin Haoyue was trying hard to vomit all the food out. Chen Xinan delivered a glass of water for her to rinse while saying hurriedly, "Let me bring you to the hospital." Xin Haoyue shook her head. "There's no need." "No." Xin Haoyue held his hands and looked up, her eyes sparkling. "My period has been half a month late." Chen Xinan's expression gloomed. He also noticed this. He parted his lips to ask her, "Do you want this child badly?" Xin Haoyue nodded. "I want a daughter, and I also thought of the name. I'll name her Chen Chening." The elders were worried, but then got the news that Xin Haoyue might be pregnant. After a moment of happiness, they started to feel anxious. Everyone was careful, afraid that Xin Haoyue may not eat well or get hurt. After all, she'd be pregnant for 10 months. However, Xin Haoyue didn't mind it at all. She ate and slept whenever. From time to time, she would ask Chen Chenan, "Anan, do you want a sister or brother?" Without looking back, Chen Chenan replied, "Sister," while playing. Yet, when Chen Xinan was sleeping with her at night, he didn't dare to move, afraid of touching her stomach. Xin Haoyue teased him, "I'm the pregnant one, and I'm not even that anxious. Can you not be so nervous?" Chen Xinan said nothing. He was really nervous about her, to the point where his hands were covered in sweat when he stood outside of the delivery room. Up until the doctor walked out and announced that mother and daughter were safe. Even then, he didn't feel any less nervous. Xin Haoyue watched the nurse carry her daughter over. She smiled and touched her little hands. "Min, she looks extremely like Anan." When the nurse carried the child away, Xin Haoyue saw Chen Xinan rush him. She curled her lips up and comforted him. "I'm okay." Chen Xinan kissed her forehead. In an unsteady voice, "I won't let you leave me again this time. I won't leave you. I'll forever be with you. In this life, I have you, the children, and a family. In this life, I hope we can live to old age happily." The next time Chen Jinxing saw Yin Liyue was January 3rd, the day of their class reunion. Oh, that's not right. It wasn't even considered a class reunion. She and Chen Jinxing were elementary school classmates. They were only in the same class when they were in 4th and 6th grade. Although they luckily got into the same middle school, the two's classes were far away from each other. When they graduated from middle school, the two basically parted their ways. She and Chen Jinxing hadn't seen each other for decades. Yin Liyun and a few old classmates had met up. She heard one of the girls talk proudly about the top scorer in the sciences within her university. Her tone was full of pride, arousing Yin Liyue's curiosity. Therefore, she listened in on their conversation. Classmate A said that the top scorer in the sciences was very aloof, but this didn't stop their junior and sisters advancing dauntlessly to deliver love letters. She retold the story emotionally about the one time she witnessed a girl shamelessly stopping Chen Jinxing, dragging his suitcase and leaving the school after graduation. Classmate A was too far, so she couldn't hear what the junior sister said to Chen Jinxing. Chen Jinxing, who had been silent, finally said something. However, she couldn't hear clearly either. In short, Chen Jinxing left freely, dragging his luggage behind him after he finished. Meanwhile, the girl who confessed and got rejected cried right there. When classmate A spoke of this, she was really excited. Her facial expression and actions were very accurate and full to the details. After she finished, she added, "A lot of us were talking about the type of woman that a proud and aloof man like Chen Jinxing would fall in love with." Yin Yun was planning on taking a sip of her milk tea when her hands almost trembled and spilt it as she heard his name. She steadied herself and asked unbelievably, "You're talking about Chen Jinxing, that top scorer in the sciences? Right? Chen Jinxing? Liyue, do you recognize him too? Let me tell you, he's very handsome and there are countless girls who like him." Yin Liyue didn't mind her classmates' questioning gazes as she quickly lowered her head and pretended to drink milk tea. She emphasized her innocence. "No, I don't know him." In the next period of time, the classmate didn't mention the previous topic either. Even if Yin Liyue wanted to know more about Chen Jinxing, she controlled herself and stopped herself from asking. The secrets of the past were only suitable to be left in the past. Let it pass. Besides studying in senior year, Yin Liyue also attended associations and worked part-time jobs. The 4 years' worth of memories seemed to be very long, but it ended in the snap of a finger. The day before they left school, she and her roommates went out to eat dinner. By then, they started sighing and reminiscing about their time in university. One of her roommates threw her arms around her shoulders and asked, "Yin Liyue, I regret not finding a boyfriend in university. How about you? Do you regret this?" There were 4 people in the dorm. Only the 2 of them stayed single through the entire 4 years of university. Yin Liyue suddenly realized, "I almost forgot. It is quite regretful." "Ah, can you at least act more sincere? Who are you trying to fool with that calm tone?" "Am I not bitter and hateful enough?" Yin Liyue said innocently. Her roommate responded, "Touch your hurt. Doesn't it hurt?" Yin Liyue smiled, saying nothing. It didn't seem that important whether it hurt or not. She only knew that no matter how much time passed, a figure would always appear in her dream late at night, despite his silhouette slowly fading away. She could still remember him deeply. She knew it was him, no matter how far he was from her. She found it quite crazy when she recalled the mornings where she became delighted with joy because she had dreamed of him. Yin Yue didn't think about spending the rest of her life with anyone. She had a simple plan. When she was of marriageable age and her parents started to urge her to marry and arranged blind dates for her, she'd be good and follow their decision. Then, she'd get married to a man who was pleasing to the eye and bear his child. Best, she'd find someone with a good and gentle personality, someone that doesn't like to drink or smoke or fight. As long as they could live a peaceful life with her. As for love, she didn't really care. As long as nothing happens. Maybe a day in the future, he'd appear in her dreams again. But she thought that as time passed by, Chen Zhenxing would completely disappear from her memory one day. One day, she would be able to control her emotions and stop thinking of him. She would stop recalling his appearance. Time will put an end to everything. But why? After all these years, she was still able to bump into him without warning. That girl that was co-renting with Yin Liyue was Zhou Lian. They were the same age. After Zhou Lian graduated, she became a singer at a bar. She practically lived the opposite life as Yin Liyue. Therefore, the two didn't get many chances to chat with each other. Yin Liyue hurried out of the house in the morning. By the time she returned to her apartment around 6 p.m., she noticed that she had placed the key in her overcoat she wore yesterday. Even more, she hung the overcoat on the clothes hanger in her room. She couldn't get in. Yin Liyue had no choice but to call Zhou Lian. Zhou Lian picked up quickly, but it was quite noisy on the other side. It felt like she was at a KTV. Yin Liyue explained the situation to her, then Zhou Lian said, "I can't leave right now. If you want to grab the key, come here." After that, she sent her the specific address and the room number. Yin Liyue walked to the private room, hesitant. She wondered if she should knock on the door when she encountered the other young men planning on entering the private room. One of the men inquired. She said that she was looking for Zhou Lian. "Oh, you're looking for Zhou Lian? She's inside busy rolling dice with someone. Come in." Yin Liyue originally wanted to ask him to call Zhou Lian, who knew that the door opened and she was pushed in. She stood by the door and glanced at the messy private room, men and women grouped together. They were either drinking, chatting, eating, rolling dice, or singing. Yet, under the rainbow-colored rotating disco, she clearly saw the man sitting in the center of the long sofa wearing a black woolen sweater. He kept his head down as he looked at his phone. The rotating lights just passed by and the light shone on his face. He slightly tilted his head to avoid the light. Yet, Yin Yue stared at him, forgetting her expression. However, she couldn't help but repeat his name over and over. Chen Zhenxing, Chen Zhenxing. "Zhou Lian, there's a beautiful woman looking for you." The man by her shouted. He turned around to see Yin Liyue standing there, stunned. She was staring in the direction of Chen Zhenxing, concentrated. "Hey, beautiful woman, don't just look at that handsome guy. Aren't you looking for Zhou Lian?" Zhou Lian lost, so her classmates had been trying to get her to drink. She looked up at Yin Liyue, unable to leave. Therefore, at the top of her lungs, "Liyue, I left the keys in the pocket of my jacket. It's the red overcoat by the door. Grab it yourself." Yin Liyue was unable to withdraw his gaze from Chen Zhenxing. She only knew that the man by his side said something in his ears before he looked up at her. However, Yin Liyue had already turned her head, feeling guilty. She hurriedly found Zhou Lian's overcoat. As expected, there was a string of keys. She told Zhou Lian that she was leaving now, and she didn't urge her to stay either. Yin Liyue thanked the man. Before leaving, she slightly tilted her head to glance at the center. Chen Zhenxing still had his head down, looking at his phone as if he didn't place anything in his heart. After Yin Liyue closed the doors, her heart felt heavy. She was able to see Chen Zhenxing again. Was this fate's blessing? "Hey Chen Zhenxing, do you know that beautiful woman?" Chen Zhenxing unhappily responded, "Which beautiful woman?" after he got interrupted while playing a game. "The beautiful woman that came to look for Zhou Lian. I saw you staring at her for a long time as if you'd seen your old lover." "Who knew?" Chen Zhenxing asked. "Who is Zhou Lian?" Zhou Lian's smile froze, looking at him. However, Chen Zhenxing didn't seem to detect it. He stood up and said, "I'm heading out for a moment." After Chen Zhenxing left the private room, he reached for the cigarette in the pocket of his overcoat. He took out the cigarette with his slender finger and played with it for a while before heading to the elevator. As expected, this class reunion was boring, even more boring than he expected. He didn't remember that many people's names in the high school reunion. After he entered the room, he really wanted to leave. However, he took in the big picture for consideration and decided to stay there for half an hour. There were some people fated to only be strangers in other people's lives. They won't come back anymore. Time was really magical. After Chen Zhenxing came out of the elevator, he suddenly remembered what his close friend Liu Ying had said. "Chen Zhenxing, when will you stop being like this? If it was up to me, you shouldn't be staying by yourself. You need to attend more events. That way, you can forget her quicker." In the year or more so that she left, he was frequently upsetted. Liu Ying wanted to tell him that one needed to look forward in life. Xin Haoyue had already died. There was no way she would ever come back. Those that were alive should all the more live a better life. Chen Zhenxing didn't express any opinion to Liu Ying's lengthy speech. Liu Ying wasn't him. He didn't understand the empty feeling in his heart. Chen Zhenxing glanced at the snow outside. Someone had come to this world and left a mark in his heart. From then on, it was incomparably difficult to wipe away her traces. When Chen Jinxing took out his key to prepare to fetch his car, he saw someone standing not far from him. She seemed to be a little familiar. Chen Jinxing carefully thought about it before confirming that he didn't know her. As for Yin Liyue, she never expected to be able to meet him again. Chen Jinxing saw that there was a sparkling and translucent light in her eyes. She seemed to be tearing up. He found that strange and subconsciously asked, "Miss, do we know each other?" After that, he understood why he thought she was familiar. She was the girl that stared fixated at him in the private room. Someone even teased him, saying that she was his old lover. Chen Jinxing knew otherwise. When did he have an old lover? After he asked, he noticed that she still stood there like a statue. However, her eyes were sparkling and bright as if they were really old acquaintances. Unexpectedly, she really responded, "We know each other, Chen Jinxing." She actually knew his name? Chen Jinxing lightly smiled and carelessly retorted, "Oh, then who are you?" "I'm Yin Liyue. You won't remember me." She said this, but her gaze was still glued to him. "Yin Liyue?" Chen Jinxing searched through the names of his few female friends in his memory, coming up to no result, however. Therefore, he responded, "I really don't remember." Yin Liyue awkwardly laughed and turned around, her gaze in front. However, she couldn't enjoy the snow-white scene in front of her because the tears in her eyes made it blurry. "The snow," Yin Liyue murmured. "This is really one-sided." Seeing that Yin Liyue didn't plan on talking to him anymore, Chen Jinxing went to fetch his car. When he drove the car out, he saw her standing alone by the road still. It was quite difficult to hail a taxi when it was snowy, especially when it was the Chinese New Year. As a gentleman, Chen Jinxing drove the car to her side and slid the car window down. "Miss Yin, do you need a ride?" "Thank you, but I don't need one." Yin Liyue noticed that her throat was sour and bitter when she tried talking, mixed with a sobbing tone. Seeing her red ears and nose, and then at her clothes, a woolen sweater and a jacket, Chen Jinxing surprisingly asked again patiently, "Are you sure you don't need one?" Yin Liyue stayed silent. When Chen Jinxing planned on driving the car off, she opened the door and slipped in. Chen Jinxing muttered to himself as he drove, "So what were you being stubborn for before?" His voice was really love. Chen Jinxing thought that she wouldn't respond, but who knew, she said, "I'm scared that it'll be awkward." "Awkward how?" Yin Liyue tilted her head and looked out of the window. In an extremely soft voice, "Just like before. I remember you, but you don't remember me." "Since when did we know each other?" "Since first grade," Yin Liyue exclaimed. They knew each other from first grade, but the two only got in the same class when they hit fourth grade. "But I don't remember." Yin Liyue tugged the corner of her lips. "It's been so many years. Who remembers this anymore?" Chen Jinxing glanced at her, a faint guess in his heart. There was a possibility for anyone to forget. After all, it had been many years. Yet she still remembered him. He seemed to understand some of her indescribable thoughts. In the next while, Chen Jinxing didn't talk to her. Before she got out of the car, Yin Liyue thanked him. Chen Jinxing also faintly replied, "You're welcome." Yin Liyue walked ahead, her faint footprints marked in the thin snow. Through the glass window, Chen Jinxing glanced at her petite figure. In the end, he decisively drove the car away. The noises by her ear became further and further away. After Yin Liyue confirmed that he left, only then did she dare to turn around, lost in thought, as she stared at the place where he just stopped his car. After Chinese New Year, Yin Liyue's parents started finding blind date candidates for her, eager to get her married. Before the Lantern Festival, Yin Liyue saw her first blind date candidate. He was part of the senior management in a company. He was 31 years old with a roundish figure. After he saw Yin Liyue, he bragged about his brilliant accomplishment for dozens of minutes. Then he started talking to her about buying a house. He talked about the prices of the houses and how if she wanted to marry him, he could immediately buy a house with XX square meters. Yin Liyue smiled the entire time. All she was thinking about was how to get out of this situation. She tolerated his speech for an hour before her phone rang. She picked it up, and her expression changed completely. "How did this happen? I'm coming over right away." That man wanted to say something when Yin Liyue grabbed her bag and said, "Sorry, I have an urgent matter. I'm leaving now." Before he could say anything, she immediately left. "Hey, what are you looking at?" Lu Ying watched as Chen Jinxing glanced downstairs a couple of times while they were eating. Therefore, he inquired, "Nothing. I just thought I saw someone familiar." "Guy or girl? You don't know them." "Oh," Lu Ying asked meaningfully. "A girl?" Chen Jinxing ignored him. At the same time that he withdrew his gaze, he made a curious guess inside his heart. Yin Liyue was on a blind date? Chen Jinxing encountered Yin Liyue in this restaurant again, 3 weeks later. The moment he entered, he noticed her existence. She was still at the seat by the window, but her date changed. The man was slightly better than the one from last time. Of course, just a bit. The one today was a bit taller and skinnier, and he had an ordinary and proper appearance. Chen Jinxing sat behind her. When they were ordering food, he unintentionally heard the tall and skinny man say, "I earn at least 10,000 a month. How about you? How much do you earn a month?" Yin Liyue actually responded, "Not much. Just a few thousand." "Really?" Then that is a bit pitiful. Miss Yin, right? I don't have that many requirements for my partner. I just want them to be good-looking, tall, and skinny. You fit my requirements. However, it's best if my partner has properties and cars. You know that it's very difficult to buy cars and houses in the city for people with poor economic conditions. I don't require that much. You must know, right? Therefore, Miss Ye, do you have any properties and cars? Yin Yue slightly smiled. That's regretful. I don't have any cars or properties. Oh right, I got a loan of a few hundred thousands from the bank last week. I still owe the bank a lot of money now. That man asked in alarm. Why did you borrow so much money? To buy bags. There's a global limited edition that I want. Whenever I'm in a bad mood, I want to buy bags. To women, shopping fixes everything. That man looked at her as if he had eaten a fly. He picked up his jacket and hurriedly said, Miss Ye, I still have some matters to attend, so I'll have to get going now. Why don't you wait for the waiter to serve food and leave after eating? It's fine, it's fine. Yin Yue watched him run off quickly and she couldn't help but laugh. While waiting for food, she called her best friend Ouyang. Half-jokingly, didn't you say there are a lot of men in the world? How come I've only met strange people since I've gone on blind dates? Ouyang lazily responded. I think you just have high requirements. I don't have any requirements, Yin Yue argued, as long as I find them pleasing to the eye. The highest requirement is not having any, Ouyang responded. Stop comparing them to your lover in your dream. I didn't compare them to him. You know whether or not you did. Also stop thinking about the impossible. Maybe he already got married and has a family. Stop thinking about him. Yin Yue slightly sighed. I really wasn't thinking of Chen Jinqing. I just met him that day and dreamed of him twice. I haven't thought of him since. Cough, cough. Chen Jinqing, who was behind them, accidentally choked when he heard that. As he grabbed a napkin to wipe the corner of his lips, he silently said to himself, I'm actually the lover in her dream? Yin Yue was still talking to Ouyang about the blind dates. Ouyang advised her to not be so impatient. After all, she had been single for so many years. It wasn't that easy to find a suitable partner that quickly. Yin Yue also felt the same. I think I may as well find a random person on the street and get married to him. After Yin Yue hung up, she looked through her social circle on WeChat out of boredom. Besides advertisement, there was only advertisement, however. Even if there were some friends who recorded moments of their lives, they either took excessively many pictures of foods or their children. Yin Yue carefully thought about it before realizing that the majority of her female friends were married. Only Ouyang still wasn't. The two of them were worthy of being best friends. Yin Yue sent Ouyang a message, and she responded with, Get lost. She secretly smiled at her response. The waiter hadn't served her any food yet, so she planned on going to the bathroom, taking her purse along. Who knew that she just turned around to walk a few steps when she noticed that the person leaning against the other side of the sofa was the person he was most familiar with. Chen Jinqing? Yin Yue blurted out his name. After that, she realized and wondered why she did everything on instinct. At this time, shouldn't she pretend that she didn't know him and just secretly go around him to the bathroom? Wait, after Yin Yue finished regretting, she suddenly thought of something scary. She hoped that her guess wasn't true. How long have you been here? Chen Jinqing's gaze shifted from the menu. He looked up and at her, purposely saying the truth. I've been here before your blind date left. Yin Yue's expression froze. So, you heard it all? Chen Jinqing slowly closed the menu and retorted, Hear what? Yin Yue awkwardly laughed and clutched her purse tightly. She didn't even dare to look at him. In a low voice, I'm going to the bathroom. Then, she hurriedly left. The water flowed out from the sink. Yin Yue washed her hands absent-mindedly. She really wanted to splash the water on her face, to wake herself. But when she left this morning, she specially applied heavy makeup. She was too lazy to reapply it if she got rid of it. Just hold on, Yin Yue told herself. Why are you so dumb? She had just exposed her secret that she had been keeping in for so many years just like that. Yin Yue really wanted to escape, but her food wasn't here, nor did she pay the bill. Even if she didn't eat, Chen Jinqing would definitely see her when she went to pay the bill at the counter. No matter what, she would be losing face, no? Yin Yue tried to convince herself mentally for a long time. By the time she shamelessly returned, she noticed that Chen Jinqing wasn't in his original position, so she sighed a breath of relief. She prepared to head back to her seat when she noticed that he was sitting in her seat. She stood by his side, asking in confusion, Why are you sitting here? Chen Jinqing faintly said, You're here alone and I'm here alone too. Can we not eat together? Yin Yue tugged the corner of her lips, not answering. Sure, whatever you say. She took in a deep breath and sat down stiffly. The two sat together, but there was nothing to talk about. After the waiter came with their food, Chen Jinqing asked, You want to get married that badly? Chen Jinqing motioned the seat he was in. You sat here last time too? Yin Yue was really embarrassed this time. Adonis, can you not expose the truth? She poked her bowl, replying lowly, Yeah. What gave you the courage to face those strange men calmly? Chen family had gotten him several blind dates in the past year. A pity that he wasn't interested, however. He had disobeyed them quite often. Although he agreed on the surface, he didn't show up the second day. After this happened many times, Chen family's elders couldn't do anything about him either. To Chen Junxing, blind dates are like a fantasy story, unrealistic. He found it funny how people expected two people that knew nothing about each other to become interested and invested in one another just after one meeting. He asked in a serious tone, but Yin Liyue found the question strange. Because I don't have a boyfriend, and my family is anxious to get me married. If I don't go on blind dates, how am I supposed to get a partner? Chen Junxing seemingly believed her and nodded. He poured cold water on her, but your blind dates don't seem that good. Yin Liyue felt stabbed. It's fine. I'll be able to find someone I like probably after a few more times. Chen Junxing lightly smiled. You're quite optimistic. Yin Liyue looked up at him, in deep thought. Then, she lowered her head to eat, staying silent. She didn't understand why he was sitting here and eating with her. She also didn't understand why he didn't ask about her. He clearly heard her talking to Ouyang about him, no? Since he knows that she likes him, why didn't he ask about it? Yin Liyue finished this tasteless meal absent-mindedly. When it was over, she wanted to pay, but the waiter said that it had already been paid for. She turned around to look at Chen Junxing, and he just returned her gaze. Yin Liyue found it embarrassing, so she hurriedly said, I'll treat you out next time. Who knew that Chen Junxing rejected her directly? It's okay. I don't think we'll see each other in the future anyway. He pushed the door and left the restaurant. Yin Liyue watched as he walked ahead of her, and she subconsciously called out, Wait! Huh? Chen Junxing stopped and looked at her. You? Yin Liyue originally wanted to question why he pretended like he heard nothing when he did. She also wanted to tell him that she had in fact liked him for many years. She really wanted to ask if she could pursue him too. Even if it didn't work out in the end, at least let her try. However, her words got stuck in her mouth when she encountered his deep gaze. She took a step back. After seeing the faint translucent glow in her eyes and hearing her silence, Chen Junxing still asked out of kindness, You need something? Nothing. Yin Liyue tugged the corner of her lips up fakely. After seeing that he left, the smile on her face gradually faded. She knew that Chen Junxing was smart. When he chose to turn a deaf ear, it meant that he didn't care. Yin Liyue, as expected, you shouldn't be fantasizing about your Adonis. In the next few days, Yin Liyue still lived a normal life. She went to work and got off work as usual. Additionally, she still attended blind dates. However, even she became suspicious of what was going on after a few failed attempts. Today, she went to shop alone. While looking at clothes, she sent Ouyang a message. Who knew that she accidentally bumped into the person ahead? Yin Liyue only got time to see the pink corner of a woman's skirt. While saying sorry, she helped her pick up her shopping bags. Instead of helping her, she actually crossed her arms over her chest and raised her chin when Yin Liyue delivered the shopping bags to her, saying in an arrogant and overbearing tone, Are you blind? You just bumped right into me. Can you assume the responsibility if I fall because of you? Yin Liyue blinked her eyes, speechless. Miss, it's my fault for looking at my phone while walking. However, I already apologized to you. Plus, I even helped you pick up everything that dropped on the ground. I don't think you need to speak that rudely. I'm speaking rudely? The woman pointed at herself and said angrily, Do you know who I am? You dare to talk to me like this? I don't know who you are, nor do I want to. Miss, please take your things. I don't want to talk to you anymore. This is the first time I've seen such a confident person after bumping into someone. This is the first time I've seen someone like you too. You. Momo, what are you doing? A male voice suddenly inquired. Cousin, you came in time. Why did I encounter someone like her the moment I returned to the country? She doesn't even have any manners. She's being rude despite being the one that bumped into me. Cousin, you need to bring me justice. Seeing Lu Ying walking over, the Momo girl hurriedly complained, raising her voice. What's the matter? Lu Ying glanced at Yin Liyue, whose hands were full from carrying shopping bags, asking while knitting his brows. How could he not know his cousin's personality after accompanying her for the past few days? Yin Liyue didn't even look at the man that came. She smiled and said to the woman in front of her, I find it strange too. How come I met someone like you the moment I left the house? It seems like you've been abroad for too long that you've forgotten some of the virtues of your own country. Hey! My name is not Hey. Yin Liyue tossed the shopping bags back to the man, wearing an unfriendly expression. I won't talk to reason with an unreasonable person. Who are you calling unreasonable? You. Yin Liyue said bluntly. Who knew that she just handed the troublesome shopping bags over and raised her head to see the man standing by the woman's cousin's side. He was actually Chen Junxing, and he was watching the show with a smile. Yin Liyue was suddenly at a loss for words. Chen Junxing placed his hands into the pockets of his black overcoat. He seemingly teased her. There is actually a time where you don't stutter? Ah. Min, quite amazing. Yin Liyue wanted to dig a pit and bury herself after hearing his words. He was definitely not praising her for having a glib tongue, but the only reason why she was at a loss for words was because he was the one talking to her. Lu Ying asked strangely, You guys know each other? Clearly, the question was for Chen Junxing. Chen Junxing admitted. Apparently we were elementary school classmates. Apparently? Li Ying glanced at him. You guys were apparently elementary school classmates? Chen Jinxing smiled, saying nothing. Yin Liyue didn't dare to look at him anymore. She hurriedly said, I have to go. After that, she hastily left. Li Ying's cousin didn't let her, however. Cousin, she was the one that bumped into me first. How can you just let her leave like that? Lu Ying wanted to scold her, but who knew? Chen Jinxing said, that's because you were being rude and insulted her first. Otherwise, with her ostrich-like personality, why would she get into a fight? Seeing that Chen Jinxing actually spoke up for Yin Liyue, Momo shut up. Lu Ying turned around and asked meaningfully, didn't you say you guys were apparently elementary school classmates? How come you know her that well? I don't know. Chen Jinxing said the truth. If you don't know her, why did you say that? Why do I feel like you guys have a thing? Chen Jinxing smiled. How can you tell? With my eyes. See how she is avoiding your gaze? She is clearly feeling guilty. As for why, hehe, you should know, no? Chen Jinxing looked and ignored him. Yes, he knew that Yin Liyue liked him, and seemingly for many years. However, he had no memory of her, and knew nothing about her. Despite Lu Ying trying to get information out of Chen Jinxing a few times after they went back, Chen Jinxing only said that he and Yin Liyue were just elementary school classmates. Seeing that he couldn't get anything out of him, Lu Ying left disappointed. The next time Chen Jinxing saw Yin Liyue again was in the same restaurant, and at the same seat. However, when he went in, he noticed that there wasn't a guy sitting across from him. Chen Jinxing stared at her, and he was about to go when he saw a man wearing a suit hurry in. He was also carrying a briefcase in his hands. He watched as the man looked around and then walked to Yin Liyue, who was wearing a red jacket today. The two chatted for a bit before the man naturally sat in the seat across from her. For a bit. As he left, he softly chuckled in his heart. She always chooses the same place and seat for her blind dates. What is wrong with her? Chen Jinxing drove the car and left, swearing that he would never come to this restaurant anymore. However, fate didn't let him. Early July, a financial and economics magazine made an appointment to interview him. However, the person that came was actually Yin Liyue. By the time the staff was present, Chen Jinxing coincidentally had to discuss some matters with people. Therefore, the assistant in the company invited Yin Liyue to the conference room. By the time Chen Jinxing finished dealing with his matters and pushed the door in, he saw a person with his back from him, talking to someone in a low voice. That skinny figure looked a bit familiar. Yin Liyue wore a white shirt with a black tight skirt, making her waist appear extra slender. Hearing the sound, she turned around to see Chen Jinxing standing by the door, doing nothing. She slightly raised her chin and gave him a polite business smile. She extended her hand and introduced herself. Hi, President Chen. I am Yin Liyue, the person in charge of this interview. Chen Jinxing watched as she extended her fair and slender hands, then at the unbreakable smile on her exquisite face. He suddenly felt a bit disgusted. Was it because he had seen her bare face in the past that he started to dislike her putting on foundation and red lipsticks? Yin Liyue also detected the awkward atmosphere. The smile on her face became more forced. Chen Jinxing didn't walk in, but he asked, You're a staff in their magazine company? Yin Liyue nodded. She only knew that the influential person that she had to interview was Chen Jinxing 2 days after she accepted the task. Therefore, she stayed up all night to look at all the information her editor-in-chief tossed at her. Cramming, she was scared that she might miss a crucial moment, even if it was mostly about his work. Seeing his countless accomplishments, she felt really proud. The person that she secretly liked had always been this outstanding. Yin Liyue added after seeing that he kept quiet even after he nodded. If you don't want me to conduct the interview, I can. It's fine. Chen Jinxing waved his hands and walked around her, going inside. As he walked past her shoulder, he seemingly said to himself, I didn't know you're also a reporter. Yin Liyue didn't understand. She thought that he didn't like reporters as a profession. After all, rarely any people succeeded in getting an interview from him. She didn't understand how the higher-ups had persuaded him as well. Yin Liyue saw that he still wasn't that interested, but seeing that he hadn't rejected her, she said, President Chen, if there are no issues, let's begin 20 minutes later. Chen Jinxing heard this and looked at her, smiling a faint smile. Yin Liyue didn't understand, however. Chen Jinxing suddenly said, I think reporter Yin is really a good reporter. You have great foresight. You act according to the person you see. Yin Liyue's heart felt cold, knowing that he was mentioning the time she ridiculed the girl. She awkwardly smiled and said, I didn't have a choice. Sometimes, even if I'm unwilling, I have to do that. Like how she politely called him President Chen in front of her other colleagues. Chen Jinxing seemingly smiled before asking, Have your blind dates been successful? Yin Liyue didn't understand why he mentioned this. She was stunned for a moment before she responded, There hasn't been much development. Then that's really a pity. Miss Yin probably has gone on multiple blind dates, but you still haven't found someone you like. Yin Liyue tugged the corner of her lips. It was really awkward this time. Seeing that her expression changed slightly, Chen Jinxing knew that he had been a bit excessive, but he didn't understand why he felt resentful and upset since he walked in. Was he angry that she purposely tried to get closer to him, but the person who asked for an interview was his friend's friend? Was he angry that she called him President Chen? There was nothing wrong with this either. So why exactly was he angry? The annoyed Chen Junxing watched as she lowered her head to look at her script, extremely unwilling to chat with him. Therefore, he kept his mouth shut too. One could imagine how stiff and difficult the interview was when one person was moody and the other was absent-minded. At least from Yin Liyue's perspective, this was her worst performance in work. She finally lasted until the end. When Yin Liyue asked about his life goal, Chen Junxing responded simply, to always improve. How about besides work? Other than that? Chen Junxing lightly smiled, unable to contain the teasing glint in his eyes. He retorted, which aspect is Miss Yin referring to? Yin Liyue had been carefully recording this, so she kept her head down and casually replied, in terms of family or relationships. Who knew that Chen Junxing asked, Miss Yin, are you trying to ask if I'm married yet, or if I'm currently single? Huh? It was different from the answer she imagined, making her look at him in surprise. Chen Junxing looked at her and continued, I am currently single and don't have any plans to get married. Oh. Yin Liyue lowered her head and recorded this, but she had an instinct in her heart that he was trying to tell her that even if he was single, she had no hope, right? So from his perspective, she was eager to get married, while he didn't want to get married at all. Yin Liyue agreed. After all, their paths never intersected. The interview ended. Yin Liyue had her other colleagues head back first, saying that she needed to confirm some details with Chen Junxing first. The colleagues heard their conversation as well, so they knew that the two knew each other personally. When they left, they deliberately stared at Yin Liyue and Chen Junxing. On the way back, they discussed behind Yin Liyue's back. Reporter Yin is quite amazing for latching on to Chen Junxing's thigh. It seems like our magazine company can't keep her anymore. After all, we're just a small magazine company. That's right. See, it's good that she's young and beautiful. Chen Junxing is Mayor Chen's only son. She doesn't need worry about anything once she marries into the Chen family, this noble and influential family. Plus, liking Chen Junxing, this handsome and talented guy, is like a moth flying into the flames. It's best that reporter Yin is capable and can catch his heart. Don't end up losing his interest and her job in the end. Who said? Unknowingly, Yin Liyue became someone that worked hard to climb up the social ladder in her colleagues' eyes. In the quiet conference room, Chen Junxing and her were the only ones left. She was in deep thought, wondering if she should make some things clear. Chen Junxing sat in front of her. With one hand under his chin, he said with intent, Miss Yin, didn't you say you have something to talk to me about? Now that we're the only ones left, you end up being silent. Yin Liyue looked at him and suddenly laughed. Chen Junxing, you're smart like always. Is that so? You're not going to pretend anymore? You're not going to call me President Chen too? Chen Junxing retorted. If you didn't like me calling you President Chen, then I apologize. But my colleagues are present. I'm not sure what I should call you if not President Chen. After all, you think that I'm purposely approaching you with a motive. Chen Junxing's gaze flickered, saying nothing. She actually saw through it? Yin Liyue smiled. Although my grades were never as good as yours, I always worked hard with the goal to surpass you when I was in elementary school. I noticed our distance when I realized how easily you were able to obtain good grades when I had to study hard and with difficulty. When I was at the restaurant that day, you must have heard my conversation with my best friend. That's right. I like you. I have liked you for so many years. You don't need to guard against me. You don't like me, and you won't like me either. All your actions have proven that I don't even have the chance to pursue you. Chen Junxing, I actually regret liking you because I realize that my youthful and ignorant fondness of you has to be buried in the past. I'd only be covered in cuts and bruises if I revisit that. Therefore, I hope that we don't need to meet each other anymore. After that, she stood up and smiled charmingly. Sorry for causing you trouble. I'll try to finish writing the draft of the interview quickly when I head back, and I'll send it to your email when I'm done. If you find emails to be inconvenient, I can have my editor-in-chief personally contact you too. Chen Junxing looked at her and delivered a business card. I'm not the type of person to mix personal and business matters. Yin Liyue smiled. When she reached over to grab it, she said in an alienated tone, Thanks for cooperating today. Chen Junxing smiled and said nothing. After Yin Liyue returned, she stayed up the entire night to get a rough draft out. She showed it to her editor-in-charge the second day, but she was a little displeased. The content is pretty good, but it doesn't mention that much about Chen Jing's relationships. Why don't you add a bit about that wherever you see fit? Yin Liyue felt like she was in a difficult situation since she needed to fix the draft again. She really didn't dare to inquire about Chen Junxing's relationship. Back then, she felt like if she dared to ask him that question, he would have fallen out with her right then. Under desperation, she could only fix it according to her imagination. Therefore, when Chen Junxing received the initial draft and saw that he apparently didn't have time to date anyone because he was focused on his career, and that he'd spend the upcoming period on work as well, he sent her an email. You really understand me, Miss Yin. Yin Liyue saw this email just before she was about to sleep. She naturally knew that Chen Jinxing was mocking her. She said to herself, "You speak really highly of me. Since when do I understand you? How dare I?" She muttered this, but she typed out, "Mr. Chen, are there any issues? If there are, you can mark it down. I will fix it." Chen Jinxing glanced at her businesslike response and smiled. He replied, "The entire draft has issues." Not long after she sent the email, she refreshed it to see a new reply. She almost fainted from anger. She spent so much effort in writing this, yet he found it unacceptable. "Mr. Chen, where are the issues? There are issues everywhere. I just told you." Chen Jinxing. What? Yin Liyue was really anxious and mad. She rummaged through her cabinet and found his business card, dialing the number on it. It rang once before it went through. She said immediately, "Chen Jinxing, can you not cause me trouble? Even if I hurt your dignity the other day and made you feel like you lost your face, you don't need to hold a grudge for that long." "Oh, so you knew that you made me lose my face the other day too?" "Chen Jinxing, if you're angry, I can apologize to you, okay? Please don't make things difficult for me at work. Didn't you say you don't mix personal and business matters? You think I'm making things difficult for you?" "Are you not?" Chen Jinxing smiled. "I genuinely think the draft isn't that good. I'm not targeting you." Yin Liyue clenched her teeth and said, "I'll fix it." "Whatever. Bye." Yin Liyue hung up right after. Chen Jinxing glanced at the phone number and thought about it. After a moment of hesitation, he clicked save in the end. Yin Liyue fixed the draft about a total of 12 times or so before Chen Jinxing reluctantly deemed it passable. Yin Liyue really wanted to thank him, and she politely did in the end. Yet Chen Jinxing asked, "You're just thanking me like that?" Yin Liyue knitted her brows and asked on alert, "What else do you want to do then? You should at least treat me to a meal." Yin Liyue responded, "I think we won't have an opportunity to dine together." "How do you know you won't have an opportunity if you don't invite me?" Yin Liyue was speechless, but she noticed that she didn't even want to eat with him anymore. As expected, it was better to enjoy his handsome face from a distance. Yin Liyue didn't understand her thoughts. After she confessed to Ouyang, the latter asked her, "Isn't he the Adonis you've been dreaming of all these years? Why aren't you treating him to a meal now that he lets you?" Yin Liyue sighed. "Maybe Adonis-like guys should only exist in dreams. You can only fantasize about them, but you can't think about them in reality." She only talked to Chen Jinxing a few times, but she noticed that he had a poisonous tongue. Not only this, he didn't even bother to give her face towards someone of the opposite gender that held delusional thoughts about him. Yin Liyue thought that she still wasn't strong enough to receive his hits. Ouyang found this strange. "So you just like the hazy, distant feeling you get from liking someone all these years?" Yin Liyue had nothing to say. Ouyang continued, "Liyue, I've known you for a long time. I know better than anyone else that you've a devoted lover. If it's really impossible between you and Chen Jinxing, then how long would it take for you to develop feelings for someone else?" "Liyue, I think you're just lying to yourself. You're just trying to find a way out." Yin Liyue smiled and said, "You're right. I'm trying my best to convince myself and find Chen Jinxing's shortcomings, wanting to let myself get over him. However, how long would it take for her to get over him? He didn't remember her. He didn't like her. His accomplishments and background made it clear to her that she was unworthy of him. Chen Jinxing deserved better." She saw through everything and told herself time after time that she shouldn't hold any delusional thoughts. However, she could never stop herself. She didn't want to think about him, but she would frequently think of him. Sometimes, she would wake up in the middle of the night and notice that she dreamed of his voice and appearance. After she realized how his gentleness made her delighted with joy in her dream, Yin Liyue always felt very upset. She had to endure the pain of the difference between her dream and reality by herself until the morning. Yin Liyue, stop liking Chen Jinxing. It's too painful. She told herself time after time. After the draft of the interview was published, it received pretty good reviews. The editor in charge also complimented her, saying that it was the best draft she had written since she joined. She smiled and said, "It seems like President Chen has a lot of charm." Yin Liyue smiled, because she noticed that not only were Chen Jinxing's and her foresight on two different levels, she noticed that after following his strict requirements, it showed just how bad the drafts she wrote in the past were. Chen Jinxing seemed to have taught her something. If you couldn't keep on perfecting something that was already outstanding at work, then you couldn't improve. This time, blessed by the drafts, Yin Liyue even received a great sum of award money. While she was at it, she decided to use her few days of annual vacation, planning to go out and travel for a bit. Who knew that she encountered someone at the boarding area of the airport? Although she only met him once, Yin Liyue didn't know how he recognized her right away. Liu Ying dragged his suitcase behind him, standing there. He asked unexpectedly, "You're Chen Jinxing's elementary school classmate, right?" You are?" Yin Liyue was shocked. "You don't remember me? I was at the shopping mall that day, and my cousin." After he reminded her, she recalled him. At that time, Chen Jinxing was standing by him. "You're his friend?" "Not just friends, we're good brothers." "Oh." Yin Liyue said that and lowered her head to look at her phone. Lu Ying guessed. You're waiting for Chen Jinxing's call? No. He wouldn't call her. Thinking of this, Yin Liyue added, he doesn't know that I'm heading out and we're not that close either. Heh. Lu Ying disagreed otherwise. Even so, I don't believe you. I have precise judgment of people. You're the second person that I think has a thing with Chen Jinxing. The reporter back then? Lu Ying said halfway before suddenly stopping. Yin Liyue looked at him confusedly. Lu Ying awkwardly laughed. I think I said something I shouldn't have. Yin Liyue's instinct was that it had to do with Chen Jinxing, but she didn't want to make things difficult for him either. If it's inconvenient, you don't say it. Lu Ying looked at her and sighed. As his brother, I wish he could quickly walk out of this trauma. Lu Ying sat beside her and said to himself, he liked someone in the past. That person was also a reporter named Xin Haoyue. However, before he could confess, she went to the earthquake disaster area. Then, there was an earthquake aftershock, and she was unable to escape in time. Unfortunately, she died. I personally watched as Chen Jinxing had gone crazy and used all his connections to try to find her at the disaster area. But by the time he found her, she was covered in blood. Lu Ying recalled the past and thought that Xin Haoyue was very pitiful. In a deep and heavy voice, he said, he carried her body out, and that was the first time I've seen him cry. That woman died very tragically. Lin Ying paused and then added, Chen Jinxing also lived a very tragic life after she died. Yin Liyue's eyes teared up and she squeezed out in a sour and bitter tone. Why are you telling me this? Lu Ying looked at her. Because I don't want my brother to be upset forever. I wish someone could give him new hope and happiness, and I am placing all my bets on you. The plane took off. Yin Liyue glanced at the vast blue sky. She originally wanted to relax herself, but her heart felt heavy now. She felt like Lu Ying thought too highly of her. She wasn't the person that, unfortunately, died. Chen Jinxing didn't like her. Plus, there was someone in his heart. Before he gets over her, how could she possibly capture his heart? Meanwhile, Lu Ying gave Chen Jing a call after he watched Yin Liyue board the plane. I saw your elementary school classmate. What elementary school classmate? Your apparently elementary school classmate. Yin Liyue? Probably, the one my cousin encountered. How did you encounter her? I encountered her at the airport, and she seems to be in a bad mood. I even told her about you. Chen Jinxing faintly detected where this was going. You told her about Xin Haoyue? Yes. Lu Ying, since when did I give you the right to intervene in my matters? Who is she to me? Why did you decide to tell her without letting me know? Jinxing, look at you. You get angry whenever Xin Haoyue is mentioned. It's been a long time. You're the one that can't accept the truth. When exactly can you get over her? Slap.